My hands tremble as I adjust the aperture. This shouldn't be happening, not with him, not with a client. But every time he looks at me across the studio space, something inside me threatens to unravel completely. I tell myself I'm just the photographer, nothing more. Then his voice drops low. Now strip. I remember the day I first walked into Blackwood Design, portfolio clutched against my chest like armor. Ethan Blackwood had a reputation, brilliant architect, demanding perfectionist, impossible to please. I needed the commission. 6 months of freelancing had left my bank account anemic and my confidence wavering. "Miss Sullivan," he'd said, those steel-gray eyes assessing every inch of me, "your portfolio shows promise." 3 weeks later, I understand what that promise entailed. Standing in his glass-walled home, overlooking the ocean, camera forgotten beside me, I face a choice that will change everything. And God help me, I already know what I'll choose. That first morning at Blackwood Design, I arrived 20 minutes early. The receptionist, a woman so polished she seemed lacquered, barely acknowledged me as I signed in. "Mr. Blackwood prefers people to be punctual," she said, her tone suggesting I'd already failed some unspoken test. "I'm 20 minutes early," I pointed out. She looked up then, her perfect eyebrow arching slightly. "He's in the atrium, 3rd floor." The building itself was a study in contrasts. Sharp angles softened by unexpected curves. Industrial materials warmed by hidden lighting. Someone understood the psychology of space here. The elevator whispered open onto the 3rd floor, where a 3-story atrium captured the first light of morning in golden shafts that cut through the air like physical things. And there he stood, in one of those beams, back to me, staring up at the floating staircase that spiraled toward the skylight above. Ethan Blackwood in profile was architectural himself, full clean lines and perfect proportions. "You're early," he said without turning. "Is that a problem?" He turned then, and something shifted in the atmosphere between us. His eyes were a startling grain, not soft like fog but sharp like steel. "No," he said, "it's commendable." I set down my equipment bag and began unpacking my camera. "This light is extraordinary," I said, falling into the comfortable routine of setup. "You've managed to make concrete feel warm." That was precisely the intention. He moved closer, watching me work. Most architects forget that buildings are experienced, not just observed. For the next hour we moved through the building together. I photographed the play of light across textured surfaces, the dramatic shadows cast by structural elements, the unexpected moments of softness in an otherwise austere design. He didn't direct me but observed silently, occasionally adjusting something in a frame before I shot. "You have an interesting perspective," he said as I balanced precariously on a bench to capture the intersection of 3 hallways. "Most photographers try to make my buildings look pretty." "I'm not interested in pretty," I replied, checking my display. "I'm interested in how spaces make people feel." A slight smile touched his lips. "And how does this space make you feel, Ms. Sullivan?" I considered the question as I framed another shot. "Exposed," I said honestly. "There's nowhere to hide in a building like this, but also protected. The transparency works both ways." His eyes held mine for a moment longer than was professionally necessary. Precisely what I intended. By noon we had worked our way through the public spaces of the building. My muscles ached pleasantly from contorting into odd positions to find the perfect angles. I was packing away my equipment when he spoke again. "There's one more space I'd like you to photograph." I looked up to find him watching me with that same unreadable expression. "Of course." He led me down a corridor I hadn't noticed before, using a keycard to access a private elevator. We rode in silence to the top floor where the doors opened directly into what could only be his personal office. Unlike the rest of the building's minimalist aesthetic, this room contained personal touches, architectural models displayed like sculptures, books lining built-in shelves, a large desk of polished wood rather than the glass and steel used elsewhere. "This feels different," I said, looking around. "More personal," he supplied. "Yes." I began setting up for the shot, but he stopped me with a hand on my arm. His touch was light but commanding, and I stilled instantly. "Before you shoot," he said, "I want to discuss the rest of the project." He gestured to a seating area by the window overlooking the city. I sat, suddenly aware of how alone we were in this private space. "I'd like you to photograph my other projects," he said. 3 residential designs and 2 commercial spaces currently under construction. My heart jumped. This was bigger than I'd anticipated. "That sounds perfect. I'd need about 2 days per location for shooting, plus editing time. I'll need to be present for all the shoots," he said. It wasn't a request, I nodded, trying to ignore a flutter of something in my stomach. Of course, it's your vision. No, Ms. Sullivan, I'm hiring you for your vision. I just need to ensure it aligns with mine. There was something in the way he said it, something that felt like more than a discussion about photography. His gaze was too direct, too penetrating. When would you like to begin? I asked. All business now. Tomorrow, my house on the coast. 7 a.m. I blinked. That's very early for residential photography. The morning light on the cliffs is exceptional between 7 and 8. His eyes held mine. I assume you want the best conditions for your work. It was a challenge, thinly disguised as a question. 7. It is, I agreed, standing and extending my hand to formalize our agreement. He rose and took it. His hand was warm, his grip firm but not aggressive. A current seemed to run from his skin to mine, just the normal electricity of human contact. I told myself, nothing more. Until tomorrow, Ms. Sullivan, he said, releasing my hand. As I walked to the elevator, I felt his eyes on me. At the door, something compelled me to look back. He was still watching me, his expression unreadable. Oh, and Ms. Sullivan, he called. Paused. Yes, or something you can move in. The house has some unusual angles. I felt heat rise to my cheeks as I nodded and hurried into the elevator, telling myself I was imagining the double meaning in his words. The house on the cliff looked impassable, a geometric puzzle of glass and concrete cantilevered over the edge of a sheer drop to the ocean below. I parked my aging Subaru next to Ethan's sleek black Audi, feeling suddenly self-conscious about the difference in our lifestyles. Ethan opened the door before I could knock. He wore dark jeans and a charcoal sweater pushed up at the sleeves, revealing strong forearms dusted with dark hair. The casual clothes did nothing to diminish his authority. If anything, they enhanced it. Right on time, he said, stepping aside to let me enter. The interior was even more striking than the exterior, open concept spaces flowing into one another. Floor-to-ceiling windows, framing views of the coastline, sparse but carefully selected, furnishings that seemed to occupy their spaces with deliberate intention. This is ... I struggled to find the right words. Too much, he suggested. I shook my head. No, it's perfect. It's exactly what the outside promises. Something like approval flickered across his face. Coffee? He asked, moving toward the kitchen. Sleek arrangement of matte black cabinets and white marble. Please. I set down my equipment and moved to the windows, drawn by the hypnotic view of waves crashing against rocks far below. The glass was spotless, creating the illusion that nothing separated me from the drop. It's disorienting at first, Ethan said, appearing beside me with 2 mugs. The feeling that you might fall, but exhilarating, I added, accepting the coffee. Our fingers brushed, and I felt that same inexplicable jolt of awareness. You understand, then, he said, his voice lower now. Most people only feel the fear. I turned to face him. Fear and exhilaration are close cousins. It's just a matter of perspective. His eyes held mine for a long moment. Indeed, we spent the morning moving through the house, me photographing while he occasionally adjusted blinds or moved objects to create better compositions. There was an unexpected synchronicity to our work. He seemed to anticipate what I needed, stepping out of frame or into it at precisely the right moments. In one bedroom, a wall of built-in shelves caught my attention. Unlike the minimalist aesthetic of the rest of the house, these shelves were filled with books and objects, small architectural models, geological specimens, and a collection of large art books. I ran my fingers along the spines, pausing when I reached a section of photography. Books. Many featured the work of photographers I admired, masters of composition and light. Several, I noticed with a flush of heat, were collections of artistic nude photography. You're interested in the human form, I said. Not quite a question. Ethan had been watching me from the doorway. Now he moved closer. I'm interested in vulnerability, he corrected. Architecture and photography share that quality. Both reveal truth through careful framing. I pulled out one book, a collection by a photographer known for intimate portraits of subjects in architectural spaces. The images were sensual without being explicit, powerful in their suggestion of narrative. You photograph buildings, he said, standing close enough now that I could feel the heat from his body. Have you ever considered photographing people? I replaced the book carefully. I've done some portrait work. That's not what I mean. I turned to face him, suddenly aware of how alone we were in this isolated house. What do you mean? His eyes were intent on mine. I believe the true test of architectural space is how it interacts with the human form, how it frames vulnerability. My heart was beating too fast, and I have a proposition for you, Ms. Sullivan. Mere. I said automatically. If you're about to proposition me, you should use my first name. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Mia, then, my proposition is this. I want you to create a series of images that capture the relationship between my designs and the human form. You want me to photograph models in your buildings? No, he said simply. I want to photograph you. The words hung in the air between us. I felt lightheaded suddenly, as though the oxygen had thinned. Me, I managed. I'm not a model, precisely. Why I'm asking, models pose. I'm interested in authentic response. I stepped back, needing distance to think clearly. Mr. Blackwood, Ethan, he corrected. If I'm propositioning you, you should use my first name. Despite my confusion, I smiled at his echo of my words. Ethan, I'm not sure that's appropriate. You hired me as a photographer, and I still want you as a photographer. This would be a separate project, private, between us. I crossed my arms. Let me be clear, you're asking me to pose nude in your buildings while you photograph me. I'm asking you to consider it, he said, to think about the artistic possibilities, and if I say no, then you say no. The architectural commission continues as planned. His expression was unreadable. I would never make your employment conditional on something like this, Mia. That would be unethical. I believed him, strangely enough. There was a directness to him that felt honest, even as he suggested something so unexpected. I need to think about it, I said finally. He nodded once. Of course, take your time. We finished photographing the house in silence, the proposition hanging between us like an invisible presence. As I packed my equipment, I couldn't help but glance at those photography books again, imagining myself on the other side of the lens. Would you like to stay for lunch? Ethan asked as I zipped my camera bag. I shook my head. I should go. I have things to process, of course. He walked me to the door. Will you come back tomorrow for the architectural shoot at the Westridge property? I hesitated only briefly. Yes, that's my job, and my proposition. I met his gaze directly. I'll think about it. As I drove away, I caught sight of him in my rearview mirror, standing at the edge of his glass house like a sentinel. I wondered what it would feel like to be exposed in that space, with nothing to hide behind, and I wondered why the thought sent a thrill of anticipation through me rather than dread. I spent that night researching Ethan Blackwood. Beyond his architectural accomplishments, which were considerably, found little about his personal life. No social media presence, no gossip items, just the occasional profile in design magazines where he discussed his philosophy of space and light. In one interview he said something that stuck with me. True architecture creates containers for human vulnerability. Without that, we're just building expensive shelters. The next day at the Westridge property, a modernist family home nestled into a hillside, we worked as though nothing had changed. It was professional, I was focused, and neither of us mentioned his proposition, but I felt his eyes on me more intently now, assessing rather than just observing. By late afternoon, we'd captured everything we needed. Would you have dinner with me tonight? He asked as I packed away my equipment to discuss the next property. I should have said no. Maintaining professional boundaries seemed wise, especially given the uncertainty hanging between us. Instead, I heard myself say, that would be fine. He took me to a small restaurant overlooking the harbor. The hostess greeted him by name and led us to a secluded table with an unobstructed view of the water. The setting sun painted everything gold. Do you bring all your clients here? I asked after we'd ordered. No, he said simply. Just the ones I want to know better. And how many is that? A slight smile touched his lips. Fewer than you might think. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily. He asked thoughtful questions about my photography, my transition from corporate work to freelancing, my aesthetic philosophy. I found myself sharing more than I intended about my struggle for financial stability, my doubts about leaving a secure job, my fear of failure. Yet you did it anyway, he observed. Left security for uncertainty. I sipped my wine. Some forms of security feel like prison, and some forms of uncertainty feel like freedom, he added. After dinner he suggested a walk along the harbor. The night was clear and cool, stars appearing one by one above us. We stopped at a railing overlooking the dark water. Have you thought about my proposition? He asked finally. I had thought of little else. I have questions. I expected you would. Why me? You could hire professional models who are comfortable with this sort of work. He considered this, looking out at the water. Professional models give you what they think you want. They perform vulnerability rather than experience it. He turned to me. You respond authentically to spaces. That's what makes your photography compelling. And what exactly would this project entail? A series of photographs capturing the interaction between the human form, your form, and my architectural spaces. The level of exposure would be up to you. We would establish clear boundaries. Would anyone else see these photographs? Not without your explicit consent. This would be a private, artistic exploration. I leaned against the railing, feeling the cool metal against my palms. And what do you get out of this, besides artistic satisfaction? His eyes held mine in the darkness. The opportunity to see my work through different eyes, to understand how my spaces truly affect those who inhabit them. That's all. Isn't that enough? It wasn't the complete truth, we both knew that, but it wasn't a lie either. There was something else between us, something neither of us was ready to name. I'm still not sure, I said honestly. Then let me propose a test, he said. Come back to my house tomorrow evening. We'll try one session, fully clothed, just to explore the concept. If you're uncomfortable at any point, we stop. Immediately, no questions asked. I considered his offer. A test run seemed reasonably a way to explore this strange territory without committing fully. Okay, I agreed. One session, fully clothed. I'll pick you up at 7. As he drove me back to my car, I wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. Crossing this line with a client could jeopardize my professional reputation, not to mention my emotional equilibrium. But beneath those rational concerns lay something more primal, a curiosity I couldn't deny. A pull toward this man and the spaces he created that felt almost gravitational. Why architecture? I asked suddenly as we pulled into the parking lot. What drew you to it? He turned off the engine but made no move to exit the car. In the dim light, his profile was sharp against the darkness. Control, he said after a moment. The ability to create environments that shape human experience. He turned to look at me. But the irony is that once a building exists in the world, the architect surrenders control. People inhabit spaces in ways you never anticipated. Is that why you want to do this project? To reclaim some control? Something shifted in his expression, a moment of genuine surprise. As though I'd seen something he hadn't expected to reveal. Perhaps, he admitted, or perhaps to surrender it more completely. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling between us. 7 tomorrow, I said finally, reaching for the door handle. Mia, he said as I stepped out. Thank you for considering this. I nodded once and closed the door, walking to my car with the strange sensation that I was already being photographed, already being seen in ways I hadn't anticipated. I spent the next day in a state of nervous anticipation. I changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple black dress, elegant enough for dinner but not overly formal, professional, yet not rigid. At precisely 7, the doorbell rang. Ethan stood there in a crisp white shirt and dark pants, casual but impeccable. You look lovely, he said, his eyes taking me in with that careful attention. I was beginning to recognize. His house looked different in the evening light, the glass walls now reflecting rather than revealing, the interior illuminated by recessed lighting that created pools of warmth amid the minimalist design. Wine, he offered. Please. He poured 2 glasses of red and handed one to me. Are you nervous? Yes, I admitted. No point in pretending otherwise. Good, he said. Nervousness sharpens the senses. It makes you more aware of your surroundings, your body, your responses. We moved into the living room where I noticed he'd cleared some furniture, creating an open space framed by the dramatic view of the ocean, now invisible in the darkness beyond the glass. Before we begin, he said, setting down his glass, we need to establish parameters. Okay. First, nothing happens tonight that you don't explicitly agree to. If at any point you want to stop, we stop. I nodded. Second, I propose a safe word. Something you can say that immediately pauses or ends whatever is happening, no questions asked. The concept of a safe word sent a flutter through my stomach. It seemed so formal, so intentional, acknowledging that what we were doing might push boundaries I didn't even know I had. What word? I asked. Your choice. I thought for a moment. Pine, I said finally, thinking of the scent that always reminded me of safety, of childhood summers at my grandmother's cabin in the woods. Pine, he repeated. Say it once. I stop whatever I'm doing. Say it twice. The session ends completely. Say it 3 times. I take you home immediately. The precision of his system was oddly reassuring. He'd clearly thought this through, was determined to give me control even as I surrendered it. I understand, I said. Good. He picked up a camera from the side table, not my professional equipment, but a high-end model nonetheless. Tonight I photograph. You experience the space as I direct. Nothing more. I took a deep breath. Okay, he gestured to the center of the room. Stand there, please. I moved to the spot he indicated, feeling awkward suddenly, unsure what to do with my hands, my face, my gaze. Close your eyes, he said, his voice dropping lower. Forget about the camera. Focus only on my voice and your body in this space. I closed my eyes, feeling vulnerable immediately. I could hear him moving around me, the soft click of the camera's shutter. How does this room make you feel, Mia? I considered the question, trying to identify the sensations in my body. Exposed, I said finally, like I'm on display. Because of the glass walls, yes. Even though it's dark outside, I know there's nothing solid protecting me from view, yet you know, logically, that no one can see in. Logic doesn't always dictate feeling. I heard him move closer. Open your eyes. I did. He stood several feet away, camera lowered, watching me with that intense focus. Turned toward the windows. He instructed, look out at your reflection. I turned, seeing myself ghosted against the darkness beyond a woman in a black dress, pale face, uncertain posture. What do you see? He asked. Someone unsure, I admitted. Someone, waiting. For what? I met his eyes in the reflection, direction. Something shifted in his expression, satisfaction, perhaps, or recognition. Walk to the window, he said. Place your palms against the glass. I did as he asked, feeling the cool surface against my skin. From this position, I could see nothing but darkness outside and my own reflection, more distinct now that I was closer to the glass. The house is watching you, he said, raising the camera again. The space is holding you. Feel its boundaries. Against your skin. It was a strange instruction, but I closed my eyes again and tried to sense the architecture around me, the solid floor beneath my feet, the glass against my palms, the openness of the room at my back where I knew Ethan stood, observing. Move as the space directs you, he said. Let it guide your body. I felt foolish at first, but then allowed myself to respond to the environment, tracing my hands along the glass, following the line where wall met floor, finding the corners and edges that defined the room. Ethan photographed silently, occasionally, murmuring directions so soft they felt like suggestions rather than commands. Gradually, I forgot about the camera, lost in the strange meditation of movement through the space. I found myself drawn to different areas of the room, the corner where light pooled more intensely, the section of floor warmed by hidden heating elements, the threshold between living room and kitchen where the atmosphere subtly shifted. Stop, he said finally. I did, finding myself in the center of the room again, slightly breathless though I hadn't been moving quickly. How do you feel now? He asked. Present, I said, surprised by my own answer, more aware of my body, of the space around me. He nodded, setting down the camera. That's enough for tonight. I felt a strange disappointment. Already his mouth curved slightly. Always leave them wanting more, Mia. He poured more wine, and we sat at his dining table overlooking the darkened coastline. He showed me some of the images on the camera's display, me with eyes closed, hands against glass, body in various states of response to the space. They were beautiful, more artistic than I had expected, focusing on the relationship between my form and the architectural elements. What do you think? He asked. They're not what I expected, I admitted. They respectful. Did you expect otherwise? I shrugged. I wasn't sure what to expect. And now, would you be willing to continue the project? I studied his face. In the low light, there was desire there, certainly, but also genuine artistic interest. A curiosity about what might emerge from our collaboration. Yes, I said. I'd like to continue. Good. He set down his glass. Next time, I'll photograph you in the lakeside property. The relationship between structure and water creates interesting tensions. And the parameters. His eyes held mine, the same safe word, the same respect for your boundaries, but perhaps fewer clothes. Heat rushed to my face, but I didn't look away. Perhaps as he drove me home later, I realized I had passed some personal threshold. Whatever happened next would be my choice, a deliberate step into uncharted territory rather than a passive response to his direction. At my door, he made no move to touch me, maintaining the careful professional distance he'd established. Tuesday, he said, 6 o'clock. I nodded. Tuesday. As I watched his car disappear down the street, I wondered what I had agreed to and why the uncertainty felt more like anticipation than fear. Tuesday never arrived, at least not as planned. Monday morning I received a text from Ethan. Architectural photos of riverfront office building today. Client requested changes. Can you meet me there at 2? I texted back my confirmation, relieved and disappointed in equal measure. The riverfront building was one of his commercial projects. A return to purely professional territory would give me time to process what had happened at his house, what might happen next. The building was still under construction, though nearly complete. Ethan met me at the entrance, clipboard in hand, every inch, the focused architect. He wore a tailored suit today, his authority unmistakable as he directed construction workers and consulted with the site manager. "Thank you for coming on short notice," he said, guiding me through the space. "The client wants to see progress photos before the final fixtures are installed." For the next few hours, we worked together as we had on previous projects, him identifying key architectural features, me capturing them from the most flattering angles. The ease of our professional dynamic reassured me. Whatever else was developing between us hadn't compromised our working relationship as the afternoon light began to fade. Most of the construction crew departed. The building grew quiet, our footsteps echoing on the polished concrete floors. "One more space to photograph," Ethan said, leading me to an elevator. We rode to the top floor in silence. The doors opened onto what would clearly be the executive suite, a large, open space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Unlike the rest of the building, this room was nearly finished, with furniture already in place, a massive desk, leather chairs, custom bookshelves. "The CEO's office," Ethan explained. He wanted something that communicated power while maintaining connection to the natural environment. I began setting up my tripod near the windows. "The view does the heavy lifting. It's spectacular." "Yes, but notice how the interior elements frame it. The desk is positioned so that visitors must face both the CEO and the expanse beyond him. They feel simultaneously intimidated by the person and the space." I looked at the room with new understanding. "You've engineered a power dynamic. All architecture does that, in one way or another." He moved to stand beside me at the window. "The question is whether we acknowledge it." The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the room and painting the river beyond in gold and crimson. I adjusted my camera settings to capture the dramatic lighting. "Perfect," I murmured, reviewing the image on my display. "The contrast between light and shadow emphasizes the tension in the space." Ethan looked over my shoulder at the display, his chest brushing against my back. I froze, suddenly aware of his proximity, of our isolation in this empty building. "You see it exactly as I designed it," he said, his voice low near my ear. I lowered the camera but didn't step away. "That's my job." "Is it just a job to you, Mia?" I turned to face him, finding myself trapped between his body and the window. "No," I admitted, "not anymore." His eyes held mine, searching for something. Whatever he found seemed to satisfy him. "I'd like to try something," he said. Here now, my pulse quickened. "The lakeside house can wait. This space has its own qualities that I'd like to explore." I glanced around the empty office, the fading light, the city spreading out below us. Someone could come in. The construction crew has gone for the day. The elevator requires a keycard after hours. He stepped back slightly, giving me space. "But if you're uncomfortable, we'll stick to the architectural shoot." I wasn't uncomfortable, that was the problem. Despite the inappropriate setting, despite the risk, I felt that same pull I'd experienced in his house. That same curiosity about what might happen if I surrendered to his direction. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. He moved to the desk, setting down his clipboard. "I want to photograph you in this space, not as the photographer, but as an element of the architecture." Now yes, his eyes were intent on mine. The same rules apply, the same safe word. I set my camera down on a nearby chair, my hands not entirely steady. "Pine," I confirmed. He nodded, then reached into his briefcase and removed a small camera, the same one he'd used at his house. "Stand by the window," he directed, his voice shifting into that commanding tone that sent a shiver through me. I moved to where he indicated. The last rays of sunset, warm against my back through the glass. "Look out at the view," he said. "Consider how this space makes you feel compared to my house." I gazed out at the cityscape, the river winding through it like a dark ribbon. "It feels more constructed," I said, "less organic. The power here is institutional rather than personal." "Yes," he agreed, raising the camera. "And how does that affect your sense of yourself within it?" I considered the question. "I feel smaller, more constrained, because of the formal environment." "Partly," I turned to face him, "and partly because of how you're dressed, how you're behaving. In your house, you were Ethan. Here you're Mr. Blackwood." Something like appreciation flickered in his eyes. "Perceptive. Role and setting influence power dynamics." He lowered the camera. "Take off your jacket." The request was simple, professional. Even I might remove my jacket during any shoot if it restricted my movement, but the context transformed it into something else entirely. "Is that an order, Mr. Blackwood?" I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. His expression remained impassive, but I saw something flash in his eyes. "It's a request. One you're free to decline." I held his gaze as I slowly slipped off my blazer, draping it over a nearby chair. I wore a simple silk blouse underneath, professional but undeniably feminine. "Now the clip in your hair," he said. I reached up and removed it, letting my hair fall loose around my shoulders. The small act felt strangely intimate. "Better," he murmured, raising the camera again. "Move to the desk." I did as he directed, standing beside the massive wooden desk that dominated the room. "Sit on the edge," he instructed, "as though it belongs to you." I perched on the edge of the desk, feeling the cool, polished surface through my thin skirt. "No," he corrected. "Not like a visitor. Like the space is yours. Like you command it." I adjusted my position, leaning back slightly on my hands, taking up more space. Ethan circled me, photographing from different angles, occasionally murmuring directions that guided my poses. "Now," he said, lowering the camera, "unbutton your blouse." My hands stilled in my lap. This was the moment the line between our professional relationship and whatever this was becoming. If I refused, I knew he would accept it without question. If I complied, ... double quotes, "one button," he clarified, "just the top one." The specificity of the request, its restraint, decided me. I reached up and slowly undid the top button of my blouse. Nothing showed it was merely a suggestion of what might come next. "And the next," he said, his voice lower now. I undid the second button, then paused, looking directly into his eyes. "Is this still about architecture, Ethan?" He set the camera down and moved closer, stopping just short of touching me. "It's about power," he said honestly. "About who holds it, who surrenders it, and what happens in that exchange, and which of us is surrendering right now." A slight smile touched his lips. Both of us, I think. The moment stretched between us, taut with possibility. Ethan's eyes never left mine as he slowly raised the camera again. "Unbutton your blouse," he said, his voice steady but deeper than before. All the way, my fingers moved to the third button, then the fourth, working their way down until my blouse hung open, revealing the simple black bra beneath. I made no move to remove the blouse completely, and he didn't ask me to. The suggestion of exposure was more powerful than the reality. "Stand up," he directed. "Walk to the window." I slid off the desk and moved to the wall of glass, the city lights now twinkling below us in the gathering darkness. I felt the cool surface against my back as I leaned against it, my open blouse framing my torso. "Put your hands on the glass, on either side of your body." I did as he instructed, feeling strangely powerful despite my partial undress. The contrast of my professional skirt and heels with my exposed upper body created a tension that was both uncomfortable and exhilarating. "How do you feel?" he asked, circling me with the camera. "Contradictory," I answered honestly. "Vulnerable, but strong." "Yes," he said softly. "That's exactly what I want to capture." He continued photographing, directing me to shift positions. "Slightly turn your head. Look down at the city. Close your eyes." Each instruction was precise, respectful, focused on creating an image rather than exposing me further. "Now," he said finally, "I want you to choose what comes off next." The request surprised me. I had expected him to maintain complete control, to direct every aspect of my undressing. By giving me this choice, he was sharing power even as he commanded me. I considered my options. My skirt would be the obvious next step in a traditional striptease, but this wasn't about sexuality, at least not entirely. It was about vulnerability, about the relationship between my body and the space he had created. I reached down and slipped off my heels, one at a time, placing them neatly beside me. The cool floor against my bare feet grounded me, creating a direct connection to the building. Ethan's expression shifted subtly, approval, perhaps, or surprise at my choice. "Why your shoes?" he asked. "They're armor," I explained. "Professional armor. Without them, I'm more directly connected to the space." He nodded once, sharply. "Good. Now your skirt." My hands moved to the zipper at my waist. I hesitated, suddenly aware of the reality of what I was doing and dressing in an office building for my client. The professional boundary wasn't just bending, it was shattering. "Pine," I said softly. Ethan immediately lowered the camera. "We stop?" "No," I clarified. "Not stop completely, just ... pause. I need to understand what's happening here." He set the camera down on the desk and approached me, stopping a respectful distance away. What do you need to know? What is this between us? Is it just art, just exploration of architectural space and power dynamics, or is it something else? His eyes held mine, unwavering. It's both, he said after a moment. I won't pretend there isn't attraction, you feel it, too. We both know that, but this isn't just about desire. It's about seeing and being seen, about creating something together that neither of us could create alone. His honesty reassured me. This wasn't a game or a manipulation. It was a genuine artistic exploration, complicated by mutual attraction but not defined by it. Okay, I said. Finally, we continue. He nodded and picked up the camera again. Your skirt, he reminded me, his tone returning to that quiet command. This time I didn't hesitate. I unzipped my skirt and let it fall to the floor, stepping out of it in one fluid motion, standing now in just my open blouse, bra, and panties. I felt strangely calm, as though by choosing to continue, I had claimed some essential power. Against the glass, he directed. Forehead, palms, body. I turned and pressed myself against the window, the cool surface a shock against my exposed skin. The city sprawled beneath me, thousands of lights in the darkness. Anyone in the buildings across the way with a powerful enough telescope could potentially see me, a thought that sent a strange thrill through my body. Feel the boundary, Ethan said, his voice closer now. The glass separates you from emptiness. From falling, it protects even as it exposes. I closed my eyes, focusing on the sensation, the hard, cool surface against my skin, the vast space beyond, the knowledge of Ethan behind me, watching, capturing this moment. I heard the camera click. Repeatedly, felt him circling, directing me to shift slightly, to press harder against the glass, to arch my back. Each instruction was delivered in that same measured tone, as though he were directing me to adjust lighting for a standard architectural shot. Turn around, he said finally. I did, facing him now, my back to the city. He had moved closer, close, enough that I could feel the heat from his body, though he didn't touch me. Are you cold? He asked, noticing the goosebumps on my arms. No, I admitted, not cold. Understanding passed between us, acknowledgement that my body's response wasn't from temperature but from something else entirely. Remove your blouse completely, he said, his voice slightly rougher now. I slipped the silk from my shoulders, letting it fall atop my discarded skirt. The air in the office felt charged, electric against my skin. Beautiful, he murmured, raising the camera again. He continued photographing, but his professional demeanor had slipped slightly. I could see the tension in his jaw, but careful control in his movements. He wanted me, that much was obvious, but he was containing it, channeling it into the artistic process. That's enough for tonight, he said abruptly, lowering the camera. Blinked in surprise. Already? A slight smile touched his lips. Always leave them wanting more, remember. As I gathered my clothes and dressed under his watchful eye, I realized he had orchestrated this entire encounter, from the change of venue to the gradual undressing to the abrupt ending. Each element designed to build tension, to leave me curious, wondering what would come next. You planned this, I said as I zipped my skirt. Yes. Why here? Why not wait for the lakeside house, as we've discussed? He considered the question as I buttoned my blouse. Anticipation is an architectural principle too, he said finally. The journey through a space should reveal itself gradually, building tension before release. As we rode the elevator down in silence, I understood that I had become part of his design, not just a body in his architectural spaces, but an element in a larger composition he was creating between us. 3 days passed without word from Ethan. I continued my regular photography work, meeting with other clients, editing images, invoicing, all the mundane aspects of freelance life that now seemed colorless compared to my encounters with him. I found myself checking my phone obsessively, wondering if I had misunderstood. If perhaps the office building experience had satisfied his artistic curiosity. On the 4th day, a package arrived at my apartment, a sleek black box tied with a simple gray ribbon. Inside I found a USB drive and a note in Ethan's precise handwriting. Tomorrow, Lakeside, 4 p.m. Bring this. I plugged the drive into my laptop. It contained the photographs from both sessions, his house and the office building. I was stunned by their quality, by the way he had captured not just my body but my relationship to the spaces around me. They were undeniably sensual but also thoughtful, compositionally complex. In one image from his house, my silhouette was reflected in 3 different glass surfaces simultaneously, creating a visual echo that suggested movement through time. In another, from the office, the city lights blurred behind my bare shoulders, my expression caught in a moment of genuine surprise. These weren't pornography or even conventional nudes. They were studies in vulnerability and architecture, in the way human forms interact with constructed spaces. I felt strangely proud to be part of them. The lakeside house was exactly as its name suggested, a modernist structure of concrete and glass perched on the edge of a small private lake. Unlike Ethan's cliff house with its dramatic verticality, this building spread horizontally, seeming to float just above the water's surface. Ethan greeted me at the door, dressed more casually than I had ever seen him, jeans and a simple black t-shirt that revealed the lean musculature of his arms. "You brought the drive?" he asked. I nodded, handing him the small black USB. "What did you think?" he asked, his eyes studying my face. "They're beautiful," I said honestly, more artistic than I expected. "Did you have doubts about my intentions?" "Not doubts exactly. Uncertainties." He nodded once, accepting this. "Come in, let me show you the space." The interior was open-plan with polished concrete floors and walls of glass that made the boundary between inside and outside nearly imperceptible. Water surrounded the house on 3 sides, reflecting the late afternoon light in constantly shifting patterns across the ceiling. "The architect designed it to change throughout the day," Ethan explained, watching me take in the space. "The light never stays still here. It's like being inside a living organism," I observed, watching the water patterns dance across the walls. "Exactly. Architecture at its best isn't static, it breathes, it responds, it evolves with the environment." He showed me through the house, the minimalist kitchen, the sunken living area, the bedroom with its platform bed facing the water. Everything was designed to frame the view, to emphasize the relationship between structure and nature. "What's the plan for today?" I asked as we returned to the main living area. Instead of answering, Ethan handed me a camera, my own professional equipment that I had left in his car after the office building shoot. "Today, you photograph me," he said. I blinked in surprise. "What?" "The power dynamic has been one-sided until now. I direct, you follow. Today, we reverse that." The idea was unexpectedly thrilling, the chance to direct him, to capture him within his carefully curated world. "Where should we begin?" I asked, already assessing the light, the compositional possibilities. "That's for you to decide. I am at your disposal." I considered the space, the fading afternoon light, the man standing before me. "By the window," I directed, slipping easily into the role, facing the water. He moved to where I indicated, standing with characteristic precision, shoulders square, posture perfect. I raised my camera and framed the shot. "No," I said, too formal. "Lean against the glass. One hand in your pocket." He complied, his expression unreadable as I began photographing. I moved around him, directing small adjustments. "Turn your head, look down, close your eyes." I found myself echoing his instructions from our previous sessions, reclaiming them for myself. "Take off your shirt," I said, the words sending a small thrill through me. His eyes met mine over the camera, a slight smile touching his lips. "Is that an order, Ms. Sullivan?" "A request," I corrected, mirroring his earlier words. "One you're free to decline." Without breaking eye contact, he reached down and pulled his shirt over his head in one fluid motion. His torso was lean and muscular, exactly as I had imagined in my more private thoughts. "Better," I murmured, raising the camera again. "Now, turn back to the window." As I photographed, I found myself growing bolder in my directions. I had him move through the space, adjusting his position relative to the architecture, capturing the interplay of his body with the structural elements of the house. The role reversal was intoxicating, having this powerful, controlled man follow my instructions, watching him respond to my direction. "On the floor," I instructed. Sitting back against the glass, he settled into the position, his bare torso luminous in the golden hour light streaming through the windows. I knelt before him, finding angles that emphasized the contrast between his organic form and the geometric precision of the architecture. "Why did you suggest this?" I asked as I worked. "Giving me control." He considered the question, his eyes never leaving mine even as I continued photographing. "Balance," he said finally. "True exchange requires it. And I was curious how you would direct me. Are you satisfied with my direction?" A slight smile. "Entirely." I lowered the camera, suddenly, aware of our proximity, of his partial undress, of the charged atmosphere between us. "Remove your jeans," I said, the words emerging before I had fully formed the thought. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he stood and complied without hesitation. unbuckling his belt and stepping out of his jeans to reveal black boxer briefs. He stood before me, nearly naked, awaiting my next instruction. The power I felt was dizzying. This man who commanded rooms, who built spaces that imposed his vision on the world, was now subject to my direction, my gaze, my desire. Against the glass again, I directed, my voice steadier than I felt. Hands above your head, palms flat. It assumed the position, his body forming a perfect study in light and shadow against the darkening lake beyond. I photographed in a kind of trance, moving around him, capturing every angle, every interplay of form and space. Enough, I said finally, lowering the camera. Are you sure? He asked, his voice slightly rougher than usual. I set the camera down, deliberately, of the photography. Yes. Understanding passed between us. The camera had been a buffer, a professional justification for our mutual study. Without it, what remained was simply desire. He didn't move from his position against the glass. What happens now is your choice, Mia. I approached him slowly, stopping just short of contact. What if I choose to leave? Then you leave. The choice is yours. It always has been. I reached out and placed my palm flat against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and slightly accelerated beneath my hand. And if I choose to stay, his eyes darkened. Then we continue exploring this architecture between us. I chose to stay, but not in the way either of us expected. As the tension between us reached its peak, as my hand rested on his chest feeling his heartbeat, my phone rang with the specific tone I'd assigned to my biggest client, an international hotel chain whose business kept my freelance career afloat. I should check that, I said, reluctantly stepping back. Ethan nodded, making no move to dress as I retrieved my phone from my bag. The call was brief but consequential and emergency. Shoot the next morning for a last-minute promotional campaign. The kind of opportunity I couldn't afford to refuse. I have to go, I said, turning back to him. Work emergency. Something flickered across his face, disappointment, perhaps, or frustration, but he nodded again. Of course. I'm sorry, I added, feeling strangely formal suddenly. This client is important to my business. No need to apologize. He reached for his clothes, his movements precise and controlled. Your career comes first. As he dressed, as I gathered my equipment, the spell that had held us was gradually replaced by a more ordinary awareness of time, of obligations, of the world beyond this lakeside house. Before you go, he said as I headed for the door, have a proposition. I turned, one eyebrow raised, another one. A slight smile touched his lips. A gallery, a private showing of our work so far. Private meaning, just us, initially. But perhaps, if you're comfortable, a small, carefully selected audience. The idea sent a jolt through other people seeing these intimate images, witnessing this exploration we had embarked on. I don't know, I said honestly. That feels like a significant step. It is, he agreed, which is why I'm suggesting it now, while we still have professional distance. I understood his reasoning. In this moment, interrupted by external realities, I could consider the proposition more objectively than I might in the heat of continued intimacy. Let me think about it, I said finally. He nodded. Take your time, the offer remains open. As he drove me back to my car, conversation shifted to more neutral territory: upcoming architectural projects, my commercial photography work, the changing season. By the time we parted, a semblance of professional rapport had been restored, though the undercurrent of what had almost happened still hummed between us. I'll be in touch about the final property shoot, he said as I stepped out of his car. The beach house. Yes, next week, perhaps, I nodded, trying to read his expression. In the fading light, and our ... other project. At your discretion, Mia, always at your discretion. I drove home feeling strangely hollow, as though I had missed something essential. The emergency shoot the next day kept me busy, but my mind repeatedly drifted to Ethan, to the lakeside house, to the moment of choice that had been interrupted. 3 days later, I received another package, larger, this time requiring my signature. Inside was a sleek black portfolio book. I opened it to find printed versions of Ethan's photographs, exquisitely produced on heavy art paper. The images were arranged chronologically, telling the story of our exploration from that first nervous session at his house through the office building and culminating in the role reversal at the lakeside property. Accompanying the portfolio was a note: the beginning of our collection. The gallery space is secured whenever you're ready. He had moved forward with preparations for a showing, confident in my eventual agreement. The presumption should have irritated me, but instead I felt a thrill of anticipation. He understood my curiosity, my willingness to push boundaries, perhaps better than I understood it myself. I called him that evening. I received the portfolio, I said when he answered, and his voice was neutral, giving nothing away. It's beautiful work. Yes, he agreed. It is. Tell me about this gallery. A private space owned by a colleague. Small, discreet, excellent security. We would control the guest list entirely if you prefer no guests at all. That's also an option. When? Next month, after we complete the beach house shoot. I took a deep breath. Okay, you'll consider it. Okay, let's do it. But I want approval over the final selection of images and the guest list, of course. I could hear the satisfaction in his voice, and the beach house. Are you available this weekend? Good. I'll text you the details. He paused. Mia, yes. Thank you for trusting me with this. After we hung up, I spent hours looking through the portfolio again. The narrative was clear: a woman gradually surrendering control, finding freedom in that surrender, then claiming power for herself. It was more personal than any work I had ever done, more revealing than simple nudity. The beach house shoot was scheduled for Saturday. I spent the intervening days in a state of nervous anticipation, unsure what to expect, what Ethan might have planned for this next chapter in our exploration. Friday evening. Another package arrived, smaller this time, wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside was a delicate silver chain with a small pendant shaped like a camera lens aperture. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. An opening that controls how much light enters, how the image is formed. Along with it was a note with an address and time, but no other instructions. The beach house was the most conventional of Ethan's projects, a weathered gray structure on stilts, overlooking a private stretch of coastline. As I parked beside his familiar black Audi, I noticed other cars as well, at least 3 that I could see. Ethan met me at the door, dressed in his usual impeccable styled dark pants, white shirt open at the collar. You're wearing it, he said, nodding at the silver pendant around my neck. It seemed appropriate. I glanced past him into the house. Are there other people here? Yes, the clients. They're eager to see how their home will be photographed. I stiffened slightly. And our project separate, he assured me. Completely separate. Today is purely professional architectural photography for my portfolio and their personal collection. Relief and disappointment mingled in my response. I see. His eyes held mine for a moment longer. The personal project continues at your discretion, Mia, but not here, not with others present. I nodded, understanding his boundaries, appreciating them even as part of me had wondered what might happen in this new space. Shall we begin? He asked, gesturing me inside. The clients were a wealthy couple in their 50s, she a retired executive, he a current one. They were polite, enthusiastic about their home, and clearly in awe of Ethan, whose reputation in architectural circles apparently warranted their complete deference. For the next several hours, I photographed the house from every angle, Ethan occasionally suggesting shots, but mostly allowing me to work independently. The clients observed for a while, then left us to explore the property alone. They trust you implicitly, I observed as we moved through the master bedroom, capturing the ocean view framed by the architectural elements. They're paying for my vision, he replied. Trust is implicit in that transaction. Is that how you see our arrangement as well? A transaction? He turned to look at me, his expression serious. No, what's between us is an exploration, not a transaction. Equal participation, equal risk, equal reward. And what is the reward, exactly? A slight smile touched his lips. Discovery. As the afternoon light began to fade, creating dramatic shadows across the beach house's weathered surfaces, the clients returned briefly to approve the preliminary shots and invite us to stay for dinner. Ethan declined politely, citing prior commitments. Once they left again, he turned to me. Are you hungry? Starving, actually. Good. I know a place. The restaurant was a small, elegant establishment perched on a cliff overlooking the same stretch of coastline as the beach house. We were seated at a corner table with panoramic views of the ocean, now turned golden by the setting sun. Do you always mix business with pleasure? I asked after we'd ordered. Rarely, he replied. You're the exception. Why me? He considered the question, swirling the wine in his glass. Because you see spaces the way I do, not just as physical constructs, but as emotional environments. Because you understand vulnerability as strength, not weakness. His eyes met mine. And because from the moment you walked into my office, I wanted to know how you would respond to my direction. The honesty of his answer caught me off guard. And have I responded as you expected? No, he said, smiling slightly. You've consistently surprised me. It's refreshing. As we ate, our conversation drifted to other topics, my background in corporate photography before going freelance, his architectural influences, our mutual appreciation for the interplay of light and structure. It felt almost like a normal date, if one ignored the context of our previous encounters. After dinner, standing in the parking lot beside our cars, the tension that had simmered throughout the meal finally surfaced. "What now?" I asked. "The ocean." Wind whipping my hair around my face, Ethan reached out and tucked a strand behind my ear. His first truly intimate touch outside of our photographic sessions. "Now," he said, his voice low, "you decide. My house is 15 minutes from here, or I can drive you back to your car at the beach house." I looked up at him in the fading light, this man who had carefully orchestrated every aspect of our interaction, until this moment. Now he was offering me genuine choice, stepping back from the dominant role he had assumed throughout our exploration. "Your house," I said, the words barely audible above the crash of waves below the cliff. "But I'll follow." "In my car," he nodded once, understanding my need to maintain some independence, some control over my ability to leave if I chose to. 15 minutes, he confirmed. "I'll leave the gate open." I followed Ethan's taillights along the winding coastal road, my thoughts racing faster than my car. What was I doing? This had moved well beyond a professional relationship or even an artistic collaboration. The pretense was wearing thin. We both knew this was about desire now, about the chemistry that had simmered between us since that first meeting in his office. His house appeared around a curve, perched on its cliff edge, lights glowing warmly against the darkening sky. I parked beside his Audi and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. I could still drive away. He would understand, would never mention it again, would continue our professional relationship as though this detour had never been offered. But I didn't want to leave. The front door opened as I approached. Ethan silhouetted against the light from within. He stepped aside to let me enter, maintaining a careful distance. "Wine," he offered. I shook my head. "No, I want clarity tonight." Something flickered in his eyes, approval perhaps. As do I. We stood in his living room, the glass walls now reflecting our images against the night beyond. Two people on the edge of something, separated by a few feet of expensive flooring. "Why did you really bring me here, Ethan?" He considered the question, his expression serious. "Because the work we've been doing, the photography, the exploration of power and vulnerability, it's revealing something I didn't anticipate, which is that I'm not as in control as I thought." He moved to the windows, looking out of the darkness. "My designs, my buildings, my professional relationships, I maintain absolute control over all of it. Until you..." The admission surprised me. "I've done everything you've asked." He turned back to me. "Yes, but your surrender has been deliberate, conscious. You've given control rather than relinquishing it, and in doing so, you've controlled me." I moved closer to him, drawn by the unexpected vulnerability in his voice. "Is that why we're here? So you can regain control?" "No," he said softly. "We're here so I can surrender it completely." The words hung in the air between us, shifting the dynamic we had established through our photographic sessions. "How?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "However you want." I studied his face in the low light, this man who had directed my movements, my undressing, my poses with such careful precision. Now he was offering me the power to direct him. "No cameras tonight," I said. "No artistic justification. Just us." He nodded once. "Just us." I closed the distance between us, stopping just short of touching him. "If I asked you to kneel right now, would you?" His eyes never left mine. "Yes." "If I told you to strip for me, right here in front of these windows?" "Yes." "And if I decided to leave instead, to walk out that door and never continue this ... whatever this is?" Pain flickered across his features, quickly controlled. "That would be your choice. I would respect it." I reached up and touched his face, the first time I had initiated contact between us. His skin was warm beneath my fingertips, his jaw tense with restraint. "Kneel," I said softly, without hesitation. Ethan lowered himself to his knees before me, looking up with an expression of complete openness. In this position, our usual height difference reversed, I found myself looking down at him, this powerful, controlled man now literally at my feet. The rush of power was dizzying. I could ask anything of him in this moment, could demand any act of submission, and he would comply. The realization should have been intoxicating, but instead it filled me with a strange tenderness. I sank to my knees as well, bringing us face to face, equal again. "What are you doing?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "Choosing a different kind of power," I said. I leaned forward and kissed him, our first kiss, despite all the intimacy we had shared through our photographic sessions. His lips were soft, hesitant at first, then responding with carefully controlled passion. I felt his hands hover near my shoulders, waiting for permission. "Touch me," I murmured against his mouth. His hands settled on my shoulders, warm and steady. The kiss deepened, months of tension finding release in this simple connection. When we finally broke apart, his breathing was uneven, his eyes darker than I had ever seen them. "Stand up," I directed, rising to my feet. He complied immediately, watching me with an intensity that sent heat through my body. "Take me to your bedroom," I said. He led me through the house to a room I hadn't photographed during our sessions, a large space, dominated by a platform bed facing the glass wall that overlooked the ocean. Like the rest of the house, it was minimalist but luxurious. All clean lines and perfect proportions. "Stop," I said, as we reached the threshold. "I want to be clear about something." He turned to face me, waiting. "This isn't part of our project. This isn't art or exploration or an extension of our professional relationship. This is just me wanting you. Do you understand the difference?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. And I want you to, Mia, beyond any artistic justification." "Good, then we're clear." I stepped past him into the bedroom. "Now undress for me." Ethan maintained eye contact as he unbuttoned his shirt, his movements deliberate but unhurried. He removed each piece of clothing with the same precision he brought to every aspect of his life, folding each item and placing it on a nearby chair until he stood completely naked before me. His body was everything I had glimpsed and imagined during our sessions, lean and strong, marked by the subtle definition of someone who maintained their physique through discipline rather than vanity. In the dim light of the bedroom, he seemed almost vulnerable, despite his physical strength. "Your turn," he said quietly. I shook my head. "Not yet. Lie on the bed, on your back, arms above your head." He did as I instructed, assuming a position of complete surrender. I approached the bed slowly, cataloging every detail of this moment, the rise and fall of his chest, the tension in his muscles as he restrained himself from reaching for me, the unwavering focus in his eyes. "Pine," he said suddenly. I froze. "You want to stop?" "No, I want to be sure you remember that the word works both ways, that you can stop at any point." The reminder was touching even in submission. He was ensuring my comfort, my safety, my consent. "I remember," I assured him. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting my hand trail lightly over his chest. His skin was warm beneath my fingers, his heartbeat strong and slightly accelerated. "What do you want, Ethan?" His eyes held mine. "You, however you choose." I leaned down and kissed him again, my hair falling around our faces like a curtain, creating a private space within the exposed glass room. As our kiss deepened, I felt the last of my reservations dissolve. Whatever happened next, we would explore it together, equal participants in this architecture of desire we had built between us. Morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting patterns across the rumpled sheets. I woke alone, the space beside me empty but still warm. The events of the night before flooded back, the gradual surrender of control, the careful exploration of boundaries, the moments of genuine connection that transcended the physical. I sat up, wrapping the sheet around me, and looked out at the ocean beyond the glass. The view was spectacular, endless blue at a horizon so sharp it seemed drawn with a ruler. In daylight, the exposure of the glass walls felt different, illuminating rather than revealing. The scent of coffee drew me from the bed. I found Ethan's shirt from the night before and slipped it on, following the aroma to the kitchen. He stood at the counter, dressed only in loose linen pants, his back to me as he prepared breakfast. "Good morning," I said. He turned, a slight smile softening his features. In this moment, he looked younger, less guarded than I had ever seen him. "Good morning," he replied, extending a mug of coffee. "Sleep well." I accepted the coffee, our fingers brushing in the exchange. "Very." We moved to the dining table overlooking the ocean, a comfortable silence between us as we ate the simple breakfast he had prepared. This new intimacy felt fragile, undefined, neither of us quite ready to discuss what had changed between us. "I need to go into the office today," he said finally. "There's a client meeting I can't reschedule." "Of course," I said, suddenly aware of the world beyond this glass house, of professional obligations and ordinary life waiting to reclaim us. "Will you stay?" he asked. "Use the house. Swim, if you like. I should be back by early evening." The tea offer was tempting, a day alone in this extraordinary space, time to process what had happened between us. "I should probably go home," I said reluctantly. I have editing to finish from the beach house shoot. He nodded, accepting my decision. Without question, I'll drive you to your car. As we dressed, as we gathered my things, the easy intimacy of breakfast gradually transformed back into something more formal, more careful. By the time we reached the beach house parking lot where my car waited, a familiar professional distance had reasserted itself. I'll be in touch about the gallery showing, Ethan said as I stepped out of his car. The space is available next Friday evening, so soon. Is that a problem? I considered the timeline. No, it's fine. He reached across the console and took my hand, his touch deliberate. What happened last night changes nothing about our agreement. Mia, if you've reconsidered the showing, or if you need more time. I haven't, I assured him. Friday is fine. He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. I'll send you the final image selection for approval by Wednesday. I squeezed his hand once, then released it. Thank you. As I drove home, I found myself struggling to reconcile the different versions of Ethan I had encountered: the demanding architect, the controlling photographer, the vulnerable man who had knelt before me, the warm presence I had woken beside. Which was the real Ethan Blackwood? Perhaps all of them. Different facets of a complex person. I was only beginning to understand that the week passed in a blur of professional obligations. I edited the beach house photographs, met with clients, invoiced for completed projects. Ethan and I exchanged brief, professional texts about the gallery showing, but made no mention of the night we had spent together. It was as though we had silently agreed to compartmentalize that experience, to treat it as separate from our ongoing artistic collaboration. Wednesday morning, a courier delivered a large envelope containing printed versions of 30 photographs Ethan had selected. For the showing, I spread them across my dining table, studying the progression of our work together. The images told a clear narrative, from my first hesitant poses in his house, through the office building's exploration of professional and personal boundaries, to the role reversal at the lakeside property. The final images were from the beach house, though not from our official architectural shoot. These must have been taken while I wasn't looking. Candid shots of me working, adjusting my camera, studying the space with professional focus. I was struck by how he saw me in these unguarded moments: competent, intense, completely absorbed in my craft. There was respect in these images, an acknowledgement of me as a professional first, a subject second. I texted my approval of the selection, adding a note about the last series. I didn't realize you were photographing me at the beach house. His reply came quickly. I always see you, even when you don't notice. The message sent an unexpected warmth through me. It wasn't a romantic declaration, but it acknowledged something important: that his attention, his focus, his interest went beyond our arranged sessions, beyond the project we had constructed together. Friday arrived with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The gallery showing was small and private, but it still represented a significant step. Other people would see these intimate images, would witness this journey we had documented together. I dressed carefully in a simple black dress, elegant but not overstated. As I fastened the silver aperture pendant around my neck, I realized it had become a talisman of sorts, a reminder of the opening and closing, the control of light and exposure that had defined our exploration together. A car arrived to collect me, not Ethan's familiar Audi, but a professional car service. The gallery was in an industrial area of the city, a converted warehouse space with soaring ceilings and polished concrete floors. As I approached the entrance, I saw a small sign beside the door: private showing, invitation only. Inside, the space was dimly lit, with focused lighting illuminating each photograph mounted on the stark white walls. Ethan stood in the center of the room, speaking with a woman in a severe black suit who I assumed was the gallery owner. He looked up as I entered, excusing himself immediately to come greet me. He was impeccably dressed as always, but something in his expression seemed tense, controlled even beyond his usual precision. You came, he said, as though he had doubted I would. Of course, I replied. I approved the selection, didn't I? He nodded, studying my face. Yes, but seeing the images in this setting, knowing others will view them, it's different. Are you having second thoughts? No, he said firmly, but I would understand if you were. I glanced around the gallery, at our work displayed with such careful attention to sequence and positioning. No second thoughts. This is our work together. I'm proud of it. Relief softened his features. Good. There's someone I'd like you to meet. He led me toward a young woman standing near the entrance, stylishly dressed, with an air of efficiency that reminded me of Ethan himself. Mia, this is Rebecca Chen, my assistant. The woman extended her hand, her grip firm and professional. "Miss Sullivan, I've heard a great deal about your work." Something in her tone caught my attention, a coolness that went beyond professional courtesy. She was assessing me, I realized, and seemed to find me wanting in some way. "Rebecca manages my schedule and client relationships," Ethan explained. "She's been instrumental in arranging tonight's showing." "It's a beautiful space," I said, trying to bridge whatever gap existed between us. "Ethan only works with the best," she replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "In all areas." The emphasis was subtle but unmistakable. I suddenly wondered how many other photographers, other artists, other women had stood in galleries like this, displaying collaborations with Ethan Blackwood. Was I just the latest in a series? Before I could respond, the gallery owner approached to discuss final arrangements for the evening. Ethan excused himself, leaving me alone with Rebecca. "How long have you worked with Ethan?" I asked, attempting neutral conversation. 5 years, she replied. "I've seen all his projects develop, from concept to completion." "All of them?" Her eyes met mine directly. "Yes, all of them." The implication was clear. I wasn't the first. This exploration that had felt so personal, so unique, was perhaps just another of Ethan's carefully orchestrated experiences. Another architectural space he had designed, with me as merely an element within it. The first guests began to arrive, a carefully curated group of perhaps 15 people in total. Ethan introduced me to each one. Gallery owners, art critics, a few architects. From his firm, collectors known for their discretion and appreciation of boundary-pushing work. I smiled and nodded, made appropriate conversation. But my mind kept returning to Rebecca's implication that as the small crowd moved through the exhibition, studying the photographs with murmured appreciation, I found myself watching Ethan. He moved through the space with characteristic confidence, discussing the artistic intent behind specific images, the exploration of vulnerability and control, the intersection of human form and architectural design. Not once did he treat the photographs as exploitative or merely sensual. He spoke of them with genuine artistic respect. "He's very good at this," a voice said beside me. I turned to find Rebecca, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. She offered one to me, which I accepted with hesitation. "Good at what, exactly?" I asked. "Creating experiences," she said, her eyes on Ethan across the room. "Controlled environments where people feel both safe and exhilarated by their own daring." I sipped my champagne, choosing my next words carefully. "You make it sound manipulative." "Is it manipulation if everyone involved consents, if everyone benefits?" He turned to look at me directly. "The question is whether you understood what you were consenting to, and what was that, in your opinion?" Her expression softened slightly, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her, being temporary, being replaceable. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. "You seem to know a lot about Ethan's personal life." "It's my job to know," she said simply, "to anticipate, to manage, to protect when necessary." "Protect him from what?" "Complications, misunderstandings." She glanced meaningfully around the gallery. "Attachments that exceed the parameters of the project." The clinical language made it worse, somehow reducing whatever had developed between Ethan and me to a project with parameters. "How many others have there been?" I asked, unable to stop myself. Rebecca studied me for a moment, as though deciding how much to reveal. "You're the 3rd photographer," she said finally. "The first in nearly 2 years." "Third." The word echoed in my mind, simultaneously better and worse than I had feared. "Not dozens, but not unique either." "And the others?" "Moved on," she said. "To other cities, other opportunities." "The collaborations ended amicably. Were they all women?" "Yes." She finished her champagne. "Talented ones, like you." Before I could ask anything else, Ethan appeared at my side, his hand settling lightly on the small of my back. "Is everything all right?" he asked, looking between Rebecca and me with slight concern. "Perfect," Rebecca said smoothly. "I was just telling Miss Sullivan how impressive the exhibition looks." "Mia," I corrected automatically. "Please call me Mia." Something flickered across Rebecca's face, surprise, perhaps, at my insistence on informality. "If you'll excuse me," she said, "I should check on the catering." As she walked away, Ethan turned to me fully. "What was that about?" "Just getting to know your assistant," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "She's very protective of you." "Rebecca is efficient," he acknowledged, "sometimes to a fault." "How long has she been in love with you?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "She's not," he said, but something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced of that himself. If you say so. He studied my face. What did she tell you? That I'm the third photographer you've collaborated with this way. That the others moved on. That it all ended amicably. His expression tightened almost imperceptibly. I see. Is it true? Yes, he said after a moment. But context matters, Mia. Then give me context. He glanced around the gallery, at the guests circulating through the space, not here. After the remainder of the evening passed in a blur of polite conversation and artistic discussion, I found myself performing a role: the photographer, the artist, the professional collaborator while inside. Questions multiplied. Had everything between us been choreographed from the beginning? Was I following a script written long before I entered his office that first day, as the last guests departed, as the gallery owner made final arrangements for the exhibition's private viewing period over the next week? Ethan and I found ourselves alone among the photographs of our shared journey. My house or yours? He asked quietly. Neither, I said. Let's walk. We left the gallery and walked in silence through the industrial district, now quiet in the late evening hours. The air was cool, the sky clear and star-filled above the city lights. Tell me about the others, I said finally. Ethan sighed, his breath visible in the night air. The first was Anna, a photographer I met at a gallery opening in New York. She specialized in architectural photography but wanted to explore more intimate work. Our collaboration lasted about 6 months, and ended how she received a fellowship. In Berlin we parted as friends. And the second, Diane, he said, a former model turned photographer. We met when she was shooting one of my buildings for a magazine. Our work together was different from what you and I have created. More explicit, less psychological. Why did it end? She wanted more than I could give, he said simply. A personal relationship beyond the collaboration. I stopped walking, turning to face him directly. And what about us, Ethan? What is this beyond the collaboration? He met my gaze steadily. I don't know, he admitted. It's different with you. How? How is it different? I broke my own rules, he said. I never intended to sleep with you, Mia. That wasn't part of the project as I conceived it. So what happened at your house? That was, what? An improvisation. Yes. His honesty was disarming. An unplanned surrender. I resumed walking, needing movement to process my thoughts. Does Rebecca know about that part? No. She knows about the artistic collaboration, the gallery showing, nothing more. We reached a small park overlooking the harbor and sat on a bench facing the water. The city lights reflected on the dark surface, creating patterns not unlike those in the lakeside house. I need to know what this is, I said finally. What I am to you. If I'm just another photographer in your series of explorations, you're not, he interrupted, his voice more forceful than I had expected. Yes, there were others. Yes, there are similarities in how the projects developed. But what's happening between us is not following some predetermined script, Mia. Then what is it following? He was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. Maybe nothing, he said finally. Maybe for once in my life, I'm not controlling every variable, not designing every interaction, not anticipating every outcome. The admission felt significant. This man who orchestrated environments, who manipulated space and light to create precise experiences, acknowledging that something between us existed beyond his careful planning. I need something concrete, I said, something real to hold on to. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded document, offering it to me without explanation. I opened it to find a formal contract, similar to the ones we had signed for the architectural photography work. What is this? Parameters, he said. For us, for whatever this is becoming. I scanned the document, my confusion growing. It outlined a 3-month period of exclusive collaboration, both artistic and personal. It specified privacy requirements, boundaries, expectations. At the end was a termination clause, detailing how our arrangement would conclude when the contract expired. You're offering me a relationship with an expiration date, I said, the paper suddenly heavy in my hands. I'm offering clarity, he corrected, defined boundaries, protection for both of us. Protection from what? Misunderstandings, unmet expectations, the complications that arise when personal and professional lines blur. I refolded the contract and handed it back to him. No, he blinked in surprise. No, I won't sign a contract for something that should be organic, Ethan. I won't agree to an expiration date before we've even begun. It's not about limiting what might develop, he explained. It's about creating a safe structure within which it can develop. The architect, I said, understanding dawning. Always creating containers, always defining spaces. Yes, he acknowledged. It's how I function in the world. And if I need something less structured, something with room to evolve beyond your careful planning. He was quiet for a long moment. Then I would try to give you that, he said finally. But it wouldn't come naturally to me. I stood, needing to move again, to think. I need time, I said, to process all of this. The gallery, Rebecca, the others, this contract. He remained seated, looking up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Of course. And I need one more thing, I added. Name it, complete. Honesty, no more surprises, no more revelations from third parties. If there's anything else I should know about this situation, about your past collaborations, about what you expect from me, tell me now. He stood, facing me directly. The only other thing you should know is that I've never felt this way before, he said quietly. Not with Anna, not with Diane, not with anyone. Whatever structure I'm trying to create around us, it's not to limit what's happening, it's because I'm afraid of it. The admission hung between us, surprising in its vulnerability. Afraid of what, exactly? His eyes held mine in the dim light. Of losing control completely. The week after the gallery opening, I immersed myself in work, accepting every commercial job that came my way. Editing late into the night, responding to client emails with obsessive promptness. Anything to avoid making a decision about Ethan and his contract. He respected my request for time, sending only a brief message. The exhibition closes Friday. Let me know if you'd like to collect your portion of the prints. The gallery had sold several of the images to private collectors, all purchases approved by both of us. All buyers vetted for discretion. My share of the proceeds sat untouched. In my bank account, simultaneously a validation of our work together and a complication of what that work meant. Thursday evening, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened it, Rebecca stood there, elegant as always in a tailored suit. Despite the late hour, Miss Sullivan, she said formally, may I come in? Surprise and curiosity overcame my reservations. Of course. He entered my apartment, glancing around with subtle assessment. I was suddenly aware of how modest my space must seem compared to Ethan's architectural showcases. A simple one-bedroom with photography equipment crowding the living area, prints and reference books stacked on every surface. Can I offer you something to drink? I asked, falling back on basic hospitality. No, thank you. This won't take long. She remained standing, maintaining a professional distance. I've come without Ethan's knowledge. That caught my attention. Why? Because I believe you misunderstood our conversation at the gallery. She met my eyes directly, and because, despite my personal feelings, I care about Ethan's happiness. I gestured to the sofa. Please, sit. This sounds like a conversation we should have properly. She perched on the edge of my sofa while I took the armchair opposite. For a moment, she seemed to struggle with how to begin. When I told you that you were the third photographer, she said finally, I wasn't implying what you think I was. And what do I think you were implying? That you're interchangeable. That Ethan has a pattern of seducing photographers through his artistic collaborations. Her use of air quotes emphasized her point. That isn't accurate. I leaned forward slightly. Then what is accurate, Rebecca? She sighed, her professional demeanor slipping just enough to reveal something more human beneath. Ethan doesn't form connections easily. He lives in his head, in his designs, in the perfect spaces he creates. The few personal relationships he develops tend to be ... structured. Hence the contract. I said, yes, it's his way of making emotional territory navigable. She straightened her already impeccable posture. The previous collaborations were different. Anna was a colleague, a peer in the architectural world. Their work together was genuinely just artistic exploration. And Diane was ... She hesitated, complicated. She pursued him aggressively. The collaboration was her idea, not his. Did he sleep with her? The question was blunt, perhaps unfair, but I needed to know. Yes, Rebecca admitted, but it was always casual for him. When she wanted more, he ended it. And you think it's different with me? It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. I know it is. I've worked with Ethan for 5 years. I've never seen him this ... destabilized by anyone. The word choice was telling. Destabilized. For a man who built his life around structure and control, emotional destabilization would be both threatening and, perhaps, necessary. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because he won't, she said simply. He can't articulate his own emotions that clearly, and because you care about him, I finished for her. She nodded once sharply, more than is professionally appropriate. But I'm not delusional about my chances. Her smile was small, self-deprecating. I'm not what he needs, and you think I am. I think you challenge him. I think you see beyond the perfect surfaces he constructs. She stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. The contract isn't about limiting possibilities, Miss Sullivan. It's the only way he knows how to create space for them. After she left, I sat in the darkening apartment, turning her words over in my mind. Was she right? Was Ethan's attempt to structure our relationship actually his way of making room for it to exist at all? I reached for my phone and texted him. Can we meet tomorrow? His response came almost immediately. Name the place and time. Your house. Sunset. Be waiting. The next evening I drove the now familiar coastal road to Ethan's cliff house. The sun was just beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the glass walls with golden light as I parked beside his Audi. He opened the door before I could knock, dressed more casually than usual in dark jeans and a gray sweater. Something in his expression, a carefully controlled hope, perhaps made my heart beat faster. Come in, he said, stepping aside. I entered the house that had been the starting point of our exploration together, now transformed by all that had happened. Since the space felt different, charged with memory and possibility. Would you like wine? He asked. I shook my head. Clarity. Remember. A slight smile touched his lips. I remember. We moved to the living room, to the wall of glass now ablaze with sunset colors. For a moment we simply stood side by side, watching the spectacle of light and color. Rebecca came to see me, I said finally. His head turned sharply. She what? Don't be angry with her, I said quickly. She was trying to help. What did she tell you? That I've destabilized you, I said, turning to face him directly. That the contract isn't about limitation but possibility. He was quiet for a long moment, the sunset painting half his face in gold, the other half in shadow. She knows me well, he admitted finally. Well enough to speak for you. No. He moved closer, not quite touching me but close enough that I could feel the heat of his body. No one can do that. Then speak for yourself, Ethan. No contracts. No structured parameters. Just tell me what you want. His eyes held mine, more vulnerable than I had ever seen them. I want you, he said simply. Not as a subject, not as a collaborator, not as a temporary arrangement. Just you, however you're willing to be in my life. The directness of his answer caught me off guard. I had expected more careful negotiation, more architect-like precision in defining terms. And the control issues? I asked. The need to structure everything, to anticipate every outcome, still there, he acknowledged. I can't change my nature entirely, Mia, but I'm willing to build differently, to create space for uncertainty. I reached up and touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw, the careful restraint in his body. No contract, I said firmly. No contract, he agreed. But I need something else from you. Name it. Complete surrender, I said. Not just physically, but emotionally. No more barriers, no more perfect surfaces. His breath caught slightly. That terrifies me more than anything I've ever contemplated. I know, I said softly. That's why I'm asking for it. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with new resolve. Yes, I kissed him then, sealing this unwritten agreement between us. His arms encircled me, pulling me against him with a hunger that matched my own. We had crossed some invisible threshold from exploration to commitment, from curiosity to choice. When we broke apart, breathless, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the glass house in the blue-gray light of approaching evening. Upstairs, I said, taking his hand. He followed without question. Our roles once again reversed, me leading, him following. Both of us surrendering something essential in the exchange. The following weeks unfolded in a new rhythm. I continued my commercial photography work while Ethan focused on several architectural projects nearing completion. We didn't see each other every day, both our professional lives demanded focus and travel, but when we did come together, it was with an intensity that seemed to grow rather than diminish with time. We were careful not to advertise our relationship. The gallery exhibition had gained modest attention in certain artistic circles, and maintaining professional reputations required discretion. Still, I occasionally caught Rebecca watching us with a knowing expression when I visited Ethan's office, or noticed the subtle shift in how his colleagues treated me, no longer just a photographer he had hired, but something more significant. One rainy Tuesday, I was editing photos in my apartment when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Mia Sullivan, I answered professionally. Miss Sullivan, this is Martin Hayes from Architectural Digest. The voice was brisk, authoritative. I'm calling about your recent exhibition with Ethan Blackwood. My stomach tightened. Yes, we're doing a feature on innovative architectural photography, and your collaborative work caught our attention. Would you be interested in discussing it for our piece? I hesitated, unsure how to respond. The exhibition had been private, the images not intended for mainstream publication. That's very flattering, I said carefully, but the work was a private artistic exploration. It's not something we're promoting publicly. I understand the sensitivity, he replied, but I'm not interested in the more personal images. It's your eye for architectural space that impressed me. We'd like to commission you for a series on emerging architectural trends, possibly for the cover feature. The opportunity was significant, the kind that could elevate my career beyond freelance commercial work. But the connection to Ethan complicated matters. I'd need to think about it, I said, and discuss it with Mr. Blackwood, of course. Though I should mention that he was the one who suggested you for the commission. This surprised me. He did. Yes, he declined to be featured himself, said he's overly represented in architectural publications already, but spoke highly of your work. After the call ended, I sat with this new information. Ethan had recommended me for a major commission, without telling me, had created a professional opportunity while removing himself from the equation. It was a generous act, but also one he had made unilaterally, without discussion. That evening, I went to his house for a planned dinner. He greeted me with a kiss, taking my coat and offering wine with the easy domesticity we had developed. Martin Hayes called me today, I said as we moved to the kitchen where Ethan was preparing dinner. From Architectural Digest. His hands paused briefly in chopping vegetables, then resumed. And he offered me a commission. Said you recommended me. I did. He looked up, gauging my reaction. Your work deserves wider recognition. Why didn't you tell me you were going to do that? He set down the knife, giving me his full attention. I wasn't sure they would call. I didn't want to create an expectation that might not materialize. That wasn't your decision to make, I said. You should have discussed it with me first. He frowned slightly. I was trying to help Mia, to create an opportunity. I understand that, and I appreciate the intention. But it feels presumptuous. Presumptuous, he repeated, the word clearly stinging. To recommend your work to a major publication, to make decisions about my career without consulting me, I clarified, to assume you know what's best for my professional development. His expression tightened into the controlled mask I recognized from our early interactions. I see, do you? Because this is exactly the kind of thing I was concerned about, Ethan. The need to control, to direct, to shape outcomes. I wasn't trying to control you, he said, his voice carefully even. I was trying to support you. There's a difference between support and management, I countered. One acknowledges my agency, the other undermines it. He was quiet for a moment, visibly processing my words. You're right, he said finally. I should have discussed it with you first. The acknowledgement surprised me. I had expected more resistance, more justification. Yes, you should have. Will you take the commission? He asked. I don't know yet. It's complicated by our relationship. He nodded, understanding the concern. If you're worried about appearing to benefit from our connection, don't be. Your work stands on its own merits. Easy for you to say from your established position, I pointed out. You've already made your name. I'm still building mine. Something flickered across his face, recognition, perhaps, of his privileged perspective. What can I do? He asked. To support without controlling. The question felt significant, an authentic attempt to navigate this tension between us. Asked before, acting on my behalf. I said, discuss opportunities rather than arranging them. Treat me as a partner, not a project. He nodded slowly. I can do that. We finished preparing dinner together, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. But as we ate, as we moved through the evening, I sensed something had changed, a small rupture in the smooth surface of our developing relationship. Later, lying beside him in the darkness of his bedroom, I found myself unable to sleep. The Hayes call, our discussion, the undercurrent of tension, it all swirled in my mind, raising questions about sustainability. Could Ethan truly adapt his controlling nature? Could I accept the aspects of it that were intrinsic to who he was? You're thinking very loudly, he murmured beside me, his voice rough with near sleep. Sorry, he shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at me in the dim light. Talk to me. I'm wondering if this can work, I admitted, us long term. His body tensed slightly. Because of the Hayes situation, not just that. It's what it represents, your natural tendency to orchestrate, my need for autonomy. He was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful in the darkness. Every building I design has to accommodate contradictory needs, he said finally. Openness versus privacy, stability versus flexibility, light versus shadow. We're not a building, Ethan. No, but the principle applies. Contradiction isn't automatically incompatibility. I turned to face him fully. Are you saying our differences could be complementary rather than conflicting? With intentional design, yes. His hand found mine in the darkness, but it requires ongoing adjustment, constant awareness of structural tensions. The architect, even now thinking in terms of design, structure, balance, but there was wisdom in his perspective too. I need to know this isn't like the others, I said, voicing the fear that had lingered since the gallery opening, that I'm not just another exploration with a predetermined end. His fingers tightened around mine. You're not, he said simply. You never were. How can I be sure? He was quiet for a long moment, considering. Come with me tomorrow, he said finally. There's something I want to show you. What a project I've been working on. Something no one else has seen. The next morning, we drove north along the coast, eventually turning onto a private road that wound through dense forest. After several miles, the trees opened to reveal a construction site overlooking a small sheltered cove. The structure taking shape was unlike anything I had seen in Ethan's portfolio, organic rather than geometric, with curved walls that followed the natural contours of the landscape. It seemed to grow from the earth rather than impose itself upon it. What is this? I asked as we parked and approached the partially completed building. My new house, he said. Or it will be, eventually. I looked at him in surprise. You're moving. What about the cliff house? I designed that house for the person I was 5 years ago, he said, leading me through the construction site. This is for the person I'm becoming. As we moved through the unfinished spaces, he explained his vision, a home that embraced natural elements rather than controlled them, that changed with the seasons and aged with grace. No perfect glass boxes, no clinical minimalism, but warm materials that would patina over time, spaces that would evolve with their inhabitants. When did you start designing this? I asked, running my hand along a curved wooden beam. 3 months ago, he said. Right after our first session at my house. The timing wasn't lost on me. This organic, evolving structure had been conceived at the very beginning of our relationship. You never mentioned it. It wasn't ready to be shared, he said simply. Some creations need privacy to develop. I moved to what would eventually be a wall of windows facing the cove. Unlike his cliff house with its exposed, theatrical visibility, this space offered views while maintaining shelter, connection to nature without complete exposure to it. It's beautiful, I said honestly. Different from your other work. Yes. He came to stand beside me at the future window. That's rather the point. I spent the following week considering the Architectural Digest commission. The opportunity was significant, but I wanted to be certain I was pursuing it for the right reasons for my work, my vision, not because of my connection to Ethan. I called Martin Hayes and asked pointed questions about the selection process, about why my work had been chosen. His answers reassured me. He spoke specifically about my compositional approach, my understanding of how light transforms architectural space, elements that predated my collaboration with Ethan. I accepted the commission with a clear conscience. That Friday evening, I attended an industry event, a gallery opening featuring architectural photography by several established photographers. I hadn't told Ethan I was going. We had been maintaining our professional separation in public, and he was supposed to be working late on a deadline project anyway. I was studying a particularly striking image of a brutalist library when a familiar voice spoke beside me. The composition is interesting, but the lighting fails to capture the weight of the concrete. I turned to find a woman I recognized immediately, though we had never met. Tall, elegant, with short dark hair and striking features. Diane, Ethan's previous collaborator. The photographer was clearly more interested in form than materiality, I replied, maintaining professional composure despite my surprise. She smiled, extending her hand. Diane Reeves. And you're Mia Sullivan. I shook her hand, noting her firm grip. You know who I am. Your work with Ethan has generated buzz in certain circles. Her tone was friendly but assessing. The exhibition was quite revealing. I kept my expression neutral. It was a private showing. I'm surprised you've heard about it. The art world is small, and Ethan's projects tend to attract attention. She sipped her champagne, studying me over the rim of her glass. How is he? The question seemed loaded, but I answered simply, he's well. Still obsessively controlling every detail of his environment. I smiled slightly. Some habits are fundamental to identity. She laughed, a genuine sound that softened her elegant facade. You understand him already. It took me months. I wasn't sure how to respond to this direct acknowledgement of our shared experience with Ethan. Part of me wanted to ask her questions, to understand her perspective on the man who had become so central to my life. Another part warned against engaging with his past. "He's building a new house," I said instead, watching her reaction. Surprise flickered across her features. "Really? Something other than those perfect glass showcases he's known for?" "Yes, something organic, evolving, something that embraces change rather than resisting it." She studied me with new interest. "You've affected him more deeply than I did," she said finally. "That's unexpected." Why she seemed to consider how much to reveal. "Ethan doesn't change easily," she said carefully. "His patterns, professional, personal, artistic, they're deeply ingrained. I tried to disrupt them. It didn't end well." "What happened?" I asked, curiosity overcoming caution. "I made the mistake of falling in love with him," she said simply. "With the real Ethan, not just the perfect, controlled architect he presents to the world. I saw glimpses of something raw beneath the surface and wanted more of it. And he pulled away." She nodded, retreated behind contracts and parameters and professional boundaries. She finished her champagne in one elegant motion, until, eventually, the project reached its natural conclusion. The phrase sounded like a direct quote, clinical, detached, exactly the kind of language Ethan would use to define an ending. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Professional courtesy," she said with a slight smile. "One photographer to another. And because ... double quotes," she hesitated. "Because despite how things ended, I care about him. He's not as invulnerable as he appears." Before I could respond, a tall man in an impeccable suit approached, placing his hand lightly on Diane's back. "The collector from Dubai has arrived," he murmured. "You wanted to speak with him." She nodded, then turned back to me. "It was interesting to meet you, Mia. I hope things end differently for you than they did for me." As she walked away with her companion, I remained beside the Brutalist library photograph, unsettled by the encounter. Diane hadn't seemed bitter or vindictive. If anything, her concern had seemed genuine, but her story echoed my own fears about Ethan's capacity for genuine intimacy, for vulnerability beyond the carefully controlled explorations he designed. I left the gallery shortly after, driving without conscious direction until I found myself on the road to Ethan's cliff house. The night was clear, stars visible above the coastal highway as I wound my way toward the now familiar destination. His car was in the driveway. He must have finished his deadline work earlier than expected. I sat in my car for a moment, considering whether to go in or drive away, whether to confront the questions Diane's appearance had raised, or let them settle in my mind first, before I could decide. The front door opened. Ethan stood silhouetted against the light from within, watching me. He must have heard my car arrive. I got out and approached the house, the cool night air raising goosebumps on my bare arms. "I didn't expect you tonight," he said as I reached the door. "I was at the Masterson Gallery opening," I explained. "I met Diane." Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or concern. "I see." He stepped aside to let me enter. "Come in, you're cold." The house was warm, lighting dimmed to highlight the night view through the glass walls. A half-empty glass of whiskey sat on the coffee table beside architectural plans. He had been working from home. "How was the opening?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Interesting," I said, "especially the conversation with your ex." "Diane is hardly an ex in the conventional sense," he replied, moving to the kitchen to pour me a glass of wine. "We had a brief creative collaboration that included some physical involvement. That's not how she characterized it." He turned to face me, wineglass in hand. "How did she characterize it?" "She said she made the mistake of falling in love with you, with the real you, beneath the perfect surface." He was silent for a moment, then handed me the wine. "Diane projected qualities onto me that weren't there. She wanted transformation, revelation, emotional catharsis. I was clear from the beginning about what I could offer, which was a defined engagement with clear parameters." I took a sip of wine, studying him over the rim of the glass. "And when she wanted more, I ended the collaboration," he said simply. "It wasn't fair to continue when our expectations had diverged so dramatically, like you tried to do with me," I observed. With the contract, he moved to the windows, looking out at the darkness beyond. "Yes," he admitted. "I was trying to avoid repeating that situation, by preemptively limiting what could develop between us. By being honest about my limitations," he corrected. "About what I'm capable of." I set down my wineglass and moved to stand beside him at the window. Our reflections were ghostly against the night beyond, two figures side by side, not quite touching. "Are you capable of more than you think?" I asked quietly. The new house suggests you are. He turned to look at me directly, his expression more open than I had ever seen it. I don't know, he said honestly. That's what terrifies me, Mia. I don't know what I'm capable of with you. The vulnerability in his voice, in his eyes, struck me more powerfully than any of his carefully constructed scenarios, any of his artistic directions. What happened when Diane told you she loved you? I pressed. He looked away, back out at the darkness. I froze, he admitted, completely. Couldn't speak, couldn't think. It was like being asked to respond in a language I didn't understand. And what did you do? I retreated to what I do understand: structure, parameters, professional distance. I sent her a formal letter terminating our collaboration. A letter. I couldn't hide my shock, not even a conversation. I couldn't face her, he said simply. I couldn't bear to see her disappointment when I failed to be what she needed. The admission was painful in its honesty, this confident, commanding man revealing a moment of complete emotional inadequacy. What if I told you I'm falling in love with you? I asked, the words emerging before I had fully formed the thought. His body tensed visibly, his reflection in the glass suddenly rigid. For a long moment, he said nothing, and I feared he would freeze as he had with Diane, would retreat behind professional barriers. Then, slowly he turned to face me. I would say that terrifies me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, and that I think I'm falling in love with you too. The words hung between us, imprecise, unstructured, without parameters or defined outcomes. You think? I asked. I've never felt this before, he said. I have no reference point, no way to be certain. But if this constant awareness of you, this need to reshape my life around your presence, this willingness to risk control for connection, if that's love, then yes, I'm falling in love with you. I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers through his. And that terrifies you? Completely, he admitted. But not enough to make me send you a letter. The small joke, the acknowledgement of his past failure, broke the tension between us. I laughed softly, and he pulled me into his arms, holding me against his chest where I could feel his heartbeat, strong and slightly accelerated. I met your ex, I murmured against his shirt. I saw your new house. I'm still here. His arms tightened around me. Yes, he said, you are. In that moment, standing in his perfect glass house that now felt like a museum piece from his past, I understood what Rebecca had meant. Ethan was destabilized, his careful structures shifting, his perfect control wavering. And in that destabilization, something new was emerging between you, as something neither of us had fully designed or anticipated. I think we need a new word, I said, looking up at him. Not project or collaboration or even relationship, something that acknowledges what we're building together. He smiled slightly. What would you suggest? I considered for a moment. Evolution, I said finally. An unplanned, organic development without predetermined outcome. Terrifying, he murmured against my hair. And perfect. 3 months after our mutual confession, I found myself in Ethan's Cliff House packing boxes. My apartment lease was ending, and we had decided I would move in with him temporarily while his new house, a new house as he had begun calling it, was completed. Are you sure about this? I asked, carefully wrapping one of his architecture models for transport. Living together is a significant step. Ethan looked up from the inventory list. He was creating, methodical, even in transition. I've never been more certain of anything, he said simply. The clarity of his answer still surprised me. Sometimes these moments of unambiguous emotion from a man who had once tried to contain our relationship within a formal contract. Even though I'll disrupt your perfect systems, I teased, gesturing to the precisely organized kitchen where my less structured cooking style would soon intrude. I'm counting on it, he replied, setting down his list and coming to wrap his arms around me from behind. Disruption leads to adaptation. Adaptation leads to growth. I leaned back against him, smiling. The architect, always thinking in evolutionary terms. I've had a good teacher. He kissed my neck lightly, then returned to his list. The architectural digest commission had been completed the previous month, a series of photographs capturing innovative, sustainable architecture across the country. The feature had been well received, leading to several new professional opportunities for me, including a potential book project focusing on the relationship between architectural space and human experience. Ethan had been supportive without controlling, offering connections when asked but never presuming to direct my career. It was a delicate balance. We were both learning to maintain his natural tendency toward orchestration, tempered by respect for my autonomy, my independence softened by appreciation for his structural thinking. That evening, after the last boxes were packed and labeled his system but stacked in a somewhat chaotic arrangement, my influence, we sat on the terrace, overlooking the ocean. The sunset painted the water in shades of gold and crimson, a natural spectacle that even Ethan's architectural precision couldn't improve upon. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. My heart jumped slightly in automatic response to the classic gesture, but instead of a ring box, he withdrew a key with a simple leather fob. "To the new house," he explained. "It's not finished yet, but I wanted you to have access, to make changes, adjustments, leave your mark on the design while it's still evolving." I took the key, turning it over in my palm. The gesture was more intimate than any conventional declaration, inviting me to alter his architectural vision, to participate in creating the space we would share. "Thank you," I said, understanding the significance. "I'll use it wisely." "Use it however you want," he corrected. "That's rather the point." We made love that night with a new intensity, a physical manifestation of the emotional territory we had been navigating together. In the months since our first night together, our intimate connection had evolved from the careful power dynamics of our photographic sessions to something more fluid, more equal, yet no less charged with meaning. Afterward, lying in the darkness, with the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below, I traced patterns on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath my fingertips. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice low in the darkness. "About documentation," I said. "About how we've photographed so many aspects of this journey, but not this. Not the most intimate parts." He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Would you want to?" The question surprised me. "To photograph us like this?" "Yes, not for anyone else to see, just for us. A private record of what we've built together." I propped myself up on one elbow, looking down at his face in the dim light. "You would trust me with that? With images of you at your most vulnerable?" "Yes," he said simply. "I trust you with everything." Now, the next morning, I set up my camera in the bedroom, arranging lighting that would capture us without feeling clinical or voyeuristic. Ethan watched with professional interest as I tested angles and adjusted settings. "What are you looking for?" he asked. "The intersection of vulnerability and strength," I explained. "The moment when control and surrender become indistinguishable." His expression softened. "You've become quite the architect yourself. Of images, perhaps," I acknowledged. "You build in space, I build in light." When everything was prepared, I set the camera to remote control and joined him on the bed. What followed was unlike any photographic session we had done before. No direction, no performance, just genuine connection captured in moments of unguarded intimacy. We moved together with the camera as silent witness, documenting not just physical union but the emotional architecture we had constructed between us, the trust, the surrender, the mutual vulnerability that had transformed both of us. Afterward, reviewing the images together, I was struck by their power not as erotica or art photography, but as honest documentation of two people who had found something unexpected in each other. "These are extraordinary," Ethan said quietly, studying the display. "Not because of technical perfection, but because of their authenticity." I nodded, pausing on an image that captured the exact moment I had been seeking. Ethan's face in profile. Eyes closed, completely present in sensation, all control willingly abandoned. Beside it, another image showed me looking directly at the camera, strength and vulnerability perfectly balanced in my expression. "This is what I saw in you from the beginning," he said, indicating the second image. "This capacity to be simultaneously powerful and open. It's what drew me to you, even before I understood why. And this is what I was looking for in you," I replied, touching the screen where his abandoned control was so evident, the man beneath the perfect structure. He turned to me, more serious now. "I'm still learning how to be that man more consistently, how to exist without rigid parameters, without predetermined outcomes." "I know," I said. "I'm still learning too, how to accept support without fearing control, how to maintain independence within connection." He took my hand, his expression reflective. "An evolution," he said, echoing the word I had chosen months before. "Unplanned, organic development. Still terrifying?" I asked. "Always," he admitted with a slight smile, "but necessary." We spent the rest of the day finishing our packing, preparing for the temporary cohabitation in his cliff house while our new home took shape on the cove. As the sun began to set, I found Ethan standing at the glass wall of his office, looking out at the ocean with an uncharacteristically pensive expression. "Second thoughts?" I asked, joining him at the window. "No," he said, "just acknowledging An ending before embracing a beginning. I understood then that he was saying goodbye to more than just this house. He was releasing a version of himself. The solitary architect in his perfect glass showcase, isolated but protected from emotional risk. Not an ending, I corrected gently. A transformation. He turned to me, his eyes reflective in the fading light. You've always seen more than just surfaces, haven't you? Occupational hazard, I replied. Photographers learn to look for what exists beyond the obvious frame. And architects, he said, pulling me into his arms, learn to create spaces that protect what matters most. 6 months later, the exhibition opened at the Modern Art Museum, a collaborative showcase featuring Ethan's architectural designs alongside my photography, including selected images from our private project. The more intimate photographs remained private, but we had carefully chosen several that captured the essence of our exploration without crossing boundaries of personal exposure. The decision to mount a public exhibition had been mutual, a way of acknowledging the artistic value of what had begun as a private journey. With my career gaining momentum following the Architectural Digest feature, and Ethan's reputation already well established, the museum had eagerly accepted our proposal for a show examining the relationship between architectural space, human vulnerability, and visual documentation. The gallery space was packed for the opening night, filled with critics, collectors, fellow architects and photographers, and curious members of the public drawn by the pre-opening publicity. Ethan and I moved through the crowd separately, each discussing our work from our own perspective, coming together occasionally to provide joint insight into specific pieces. The collaboration between Blackwood and Sullivan represents a fascinating dialogue between container and contained, between the creator of space and the documenter of how that space is experienced. I overheard one critic explaining to his companions as they studied a large photograph of the lakeside house with its water reflections dancing across the ceiling. Rebecca managed the event with her usual efficiency, her relationship with me having evolved into a genuine, if slightly formal, friendship. She had found her own path forward, recently accepting a partnership role in Ethan's firm that acknowledged her architectural expertise rather than just her administrative skills. Champagne, she offered, appearing at my side during a brief moment alone. Thank you, I said, accepting the glass. Everything is running perfectly. Of course it is, she replied with a slight smile. Some habits die hard. I followed her gaze to where Ethan stood across the room, deep in conversation with the museum director. Even now, he maintained a certain control over his presentation posture. Perfect. Gestures precise. Attention fully focused on the conversation at hand. Some aspects of him will never change, I acknowledged. And you're okay with that? She asked, genuinely curious. I considered the question. The control isn't the problem, I said finally. It's what he was using it for, to avoid vulnerability, to prevent genuine connection. Now it's just, how he moves through the world. She nodded, understanding. He's different with you. Still Ethan, but, expanded somehow. Before I could respond, a familiar figure approached Diane, elegant as ever in a striking red dress, her short dark hair now streaked with a dramatic silver streak. Congratulations, she said, extending her hand to me. The exhibition is remarkable. Thank you, I replied, shaking her hand. I'm glad you could come. Rebecca excused herself discreetly, leaving us alone. Diane's eyes followed Ethan across the room, her expression thoughtful. He looks happy, she observed. Genuinely happy, not just professionally satisfied. I think he is, I said. Most of the time, anyway. She smiled at that. No one is happy all the time. Especially not perfectionists like Ethan. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two women who had shared similar experiences with the same complex man yet had arrived at very different outcomes. Thank you, I said suddenly. She looked at me in surprise. For what? For our conversation at the Masterson Gallery. It helped me understand what I was facing with him, what might be possible if we both took the risk. She nodded slowly. I'm glad. And a little envious, if I'm honest. Her smile was wistful but not bitter. Not everyone gets their timing right in life. Diane, Ethan's voice interrupted our conversation. He had approached without either of us noticing, his expression carefully neutral. I didn't know you were coming. I wouldn't miss it, she replied. The work is extraordinary. You've both created something significant here. Thank you, he said, his tone formal but not cold. He glanced between us, clearly wondering what we had been discussing. I was just telling Mia how envious I am, Diane said directly. Never want to avoid difficult truths, not just of your professional collaboration, but of what you've built personally. Ethan's expression softened slightly. I wasn't ready then, he said simply. I'm sorry for how I handled things. The apology seemed to surprise her. Well, she said after a moment, growth looks good on you, Ethan. She turned to me. On both of you. With a final smile, she moved away to examine one of the larger photographs. Ethan watched her go, something like regret briefly crossing his features. I treated her poorly, he admitted quietly. I was a coward. I took his hand, a small public acknowledgement of our relationship that still felt new. You're not now, I said. That's what matters. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, congratulations, and critical discussions of the work. By the time the last guests departed, leaving only museum staff to finish closing procedures, I was exhausted but exhilarated. Come on, Ethan said, taking my hand. I want to show you something. He led me through a door marked staff only and up a flight of stairs to the museum's roof. The night was clear, the city spread out below us in a tapestry of lights, the distant sound of traffic creating a gentle urban soundtrack. How did you get access up here? I asked. I designed the recent renovation, he explained, including this rooftop space that isn't quite open to the public yet. Of course you did. I laughed, always creating secret spaces only you can access. Not just me, he corrected, us. He led me to the edge where a glass barrier provided safety without obstructing the view. The museum occupied a hill overlooking the harbor, offering a panoramic vista of the city and water beyond. I thought we could use a moment of quiet perspective, he said, to see everything from a distance. I leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against the cool night air. It's beautiful. Yes, he agreed, but when I glanced up he was looking at me rather than the view. We stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, absorbing the city lights, the distant sound of boats in the harbor, the subtle shift of air currents around the building's architecture. I have something for you, he said finally, reaching into his jacket pocket. This time, it was a small box, though not the velvet ring box I half expected. Inside was a simple silver key, similar to the one he had given me for the new house, but smaller, more delicate. What's this for? I asked. The darkroom, he said. I had it added to the house plans. A professional space for your film development and printing. It's being completed this week. I looked up at him in surprise. You never mentioned a darkroom in the plans. I wanted it to be a surprise, a space that's entirely yours within a shared home. The thoughtfulness of the gesture creating a dedicated space for my work within what had initially been his architectural vision moved me deeply. It represented everything that had evolved between us, his willingness to incorporate my needs into his careful planning, to create room for independence within connection. Thank you, I said, closing my fingers around the key. It's perfect. I have something else as well, he said, his tone shifting to something more serious, something I've been considering for some time. He reached into his pocket again and withdrew a folded document. For a moment, my heart sank. Another contract, another attempt to structure what had been developing organically between us. But when he handed it to me, I realized it was something entirely different. What is this? I asked, unfolding the paper to find architectural drawings not of the house we were building, but of something new. A photography studio, he explained, adjacent to but separate from my firm's offices. Independent space for your growing business, but connected enough for collaboration when desired. I studied the plans, noting the careful attention to light, to workflow, to the specific needs of a professional photography studio. It was like everything Ethan designed, perfect in its functionality while maintaining aesthetic beauty. You're offering me a studio, I'm offering you partnership, he clarified, professional as well as personal. Your career is taking off. Mia, you'll need proper space, proper facilities. This would be yours entirely, your name on the door, your business, your vision, but with the infrastructure of my firm supporting it when helpful. I looked up from the plans to find him watching me intently, gauging my reaction. You're not worried about mixing business with pleasure? I asked. After everything we've navigated personally, I think we've proven we can handle complexity, he said simply. And I'd rather create space where our professional lives can coexist than force artificial separation. I studied the plans again, appreciating the thought that had gone into them, the perfect balance of independence and connection, of separation and integration. Architecture as metaphor, I observed with a smile. Always, he acknowledged. It's how I make sense of the world. I refolded the plans carefully, tucking them into my purse. I'll consider it, I said, properly, thoroughly. It's a significant decision. He nodded, accepting this measured response without disappointment. Take all the time you need, The space isn't going anywhere. As we looked out over the city together, I realized how far we had come from that first meeting in his office, how the careful power dynamic of photographer and subject had evolved into something far more complex and rewarding. We had each surrendered something essential along the way, but had gained something greater in return. 1 year to the day after Ethan first asked me to strip in his office building, we moved into the completed house on the cove. Unlike the dramatic, exposed cliff house with its perfect glass walls and precise angles, this home embraced its surrounding curved walls following the natural contours of the landscape, materials chosen to age and patina rather than maintain pristine perfection, spaces designed to evolve with their inhabitants. "What do you think?" Ethan asked as we stood in the main living area, morning light filtering through carefully positioned skylights to create subtle patterns across the wooden floors. I took my time answering, absorbing the feeling of the way it seemed to breathe with the coastal breeze, the organic flow between indoor and outdoor areas, the perfect balance between architectural intention and natural influence. "It feels alive," I said finally, "like it might look different tomorrow than it does today." He smiled, pleased with my assessment. That was the intention, a living structure rather than a monument. We spent the day unpacking, arranging, settling into the space. The darkroom he had created for me was perfect state-of-the-art equipment combined with thoughtful design that would make my analog photography work a joy rather than a technical challenge. His home office occupied the opposite wing of the house, giving us both dedicated professional space while sharing the communal living areas. By evening, we had created enough order to relax, opening a bottle of wine and sitting on the terrace, overlooking the small private cove below. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and amber, the air filled with the scent of the sea and the native plants Ethan had insisted on maintaining around the property. "I have something for you," I said, setting down my wineglass. "A housewarming gift." I retrieved a large flat package from where I had hidden it earlier and presented it to him. He unwrapped it carefully to reveal a framed photograph, one he had never seen before. It showed him standing in the half-constructed frame of this very house 6 months earlier, looking out toward the cove with an expression of rare, unguarded hope. I had captured it secretly during one of our site visits, using my film camera rather than digital to ensure he wouldn't discover it prematurely. "When did you take this?" he asked, studying the image with evident emotion. "When you weren't looking," I said simply, "when you were imagining our future here." He traced the frame lightly, his expression thoughtful. "You saw me when I didn't know I was being seen. That's what photographers do," I reminded him. "We capture the moments between the posed ones, the truth behind the presentation." "And architects?" he asked, looking up at me. "What do we do?" "You create containers for possibility," I said. "Spaces where life can unfold in ways even you can't fully predict." He set the photograph carefully on the table and took both my hands in his. "I have something for you too," he said, "though it's not quite as tangible." "I've declined the Singapore commission," he said, "the one that would have required 6 months of international travel." I stared at him in surprise. The Singapore project was exactly the kind of high-profile, innovative commission that had defined his career, a chance to create a landmark building that would enhance his already formidable reputation. "Why?" I asked. "It was perfect for you, the kind of cutting-edge design challenge you thrive on." "Yes," he acknowledged, "but it would have meant half a year of separation just as we're beginning our life in this house. Just as your career is accelerating with the book project and the new studio. I would have supported that decision," I said. "We could have made it work with visits, with technology." "I know you would have," he said, "but I didn't want to. Some things matter more than professional advancement, even for me." The significance of this choice, this willing surrender of professional opportunity for personal connection, wasn't lost on me. It represented a profound shift in priorities for a man who had once structured his entire life around his architectural vision. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Really sure. I don't want you to resent this decision later, to feel I've limited your career." "I'm sure," he said simply. "I've spent my life creating perfect spaces while keeping people at a careful distance. I'm not interested in maintaining that pattern anymore." I leaned forward and kissed him, feeling the solid warmth of him against me, the steady beating of his heart beneath my palm. "Besides," he added when we broke apart, "I've already accepted a different commission, local, innovative, challenging, in different ways. I'll be designing the new contemporary art center downtown." I laughed, understanding the compromise. He had found a way to continue his important work while maintaining our connection, to challenge himself professionally without sacrificing what we were building personally. Always the architect, I teased. Finding the perfect structural solution. Always, he agreed with a smile. As darkness fell, as the first stars appeared above the cove, we moved inside to the heart of the Hauser space, with a fireplace built of local stone, comfortable furniture arranged for conversation rather than aesthetic effect, walls designed to display a rotating collection of photography and architectural drawings. I've been thinking about what you said a year ago, Ethan said as we settled on the sofa, the fire casting warm light across the room, about finding a word for what we're building together. Evolution, I remembered. That's what I suggested. Yes, but I've been considering an alternative. He turned to face me fully. Foundation, as in building one together. He nodded. Not a rigid structure with predetermined form, but a solid base from which anything might arise. Something that supports without constraining. I considered the metaphor, appreciating its architectural precision while recognizing the emotional truth it contained. I like it, I said. Foundation suggests something permanent but also adaptable to support whatever we might build in the future. Exactly. He took my hand, his expression serious yet soft in the firelight. I don't know what form that future will take, Mia. For the first time in my life, I'm not trying to design every detail in advance, but I want to build it with you, whatever it becomes. Even without a contract, I teased gently, without defined parameters, especially without those things, he said. Though I do have one specific structure in mind, if you're amenable. From his pocket, he withdrew a small box this time, the velvet kind I had half expected on the museum rooftop. Inside was a ring, simple yet striking, a band of brushed platinum holding. Not a traditional diamond, but a unique stone that seemed to capture and refract light in unexpected ways. It's labradorite, he explained as I examined it. A stone that reveals different colors depending on how light strikes it, how it's viewed, how it changes over time. Like us. I looked up from the ring to find him watching me with an expression of complete openness, no careful control, no professional mask, just Ethan, vulnerable and present. Is this a proposal? I asked. It's a question, he clarified. One without a predetermined answer. One I'm asking without knowing the outcome. That's very unlike you, I observed with a smile. I'm evolving, he reminded me. I slipped the ring onto my finger, watching how it caught the firelight, revealing flashes of blue and gold within the gray stone. Yes, I said simply. He exhaled, tension I hadn't even noticed leaving his body. Just like that, I confirmed. No contract required. Later that night, lying beside him in our new bedroom with moonlight filtering through the skylight above our bed, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here, from photographer and subject to partners in every sense of the word. What are you thinking? Ethan asked, his voice low in the darkness. About that day in your office, I said, when you first told me to strip. How terrified and exhilarated I felt in that moment of choice. His hand found mine beneath the covers, fingers lacing together. Do you regret it? Saying yes that day? Not for a moment, I said honestly, though I had no idea where it would lead. Neither did I, he admitted. For once in my life, I was improvising rather than following a carefully designed plan. I turned to face him in the gentle darkness, tracing the familiar contours of his face with my fingertips. And now, do you miss the perfect control, the flawless structure you used to maintain? He considered the question seriously, as he did all questions. Sometimes, he acknowledged, in moments of uncertainty or vulnerability. But what I've gained in its place is worth the discomfort. And what have you gained? I asked. His eyes held mine in the moonlight. The ability to surrender, he said softly, to trust, to build something with someone else rather than imposing my vision alone. He smiled slightly. To strip away the perfect surface and reveal what lies beneath. I kissed him then, a gentle affirmation of the truth in his words. As we moved together in the darkness, as boundaries dissolved between us, I understood that what we had created went beyond physical intimacy, beyond professional collaboration, beyond even emotional connection. We had built a foundation strong enough to support whatever might come, flexible enough to adapt to life's inevitable changes, honest enough to accommodate both our strengths and vulnerabilities. Not a perfect structure of glass and steel, but something organic, evolving, alive with possibility. In the moment of complete surrender, of perfect trust between us, I realized that I was no longer just the photographer, and he was no longer just the architect. We had become something more complex and more beautiful, collaborators in the ongoing design of a shared life, each bringing our unique vision to the creation of something neither of us could have built alone. And in that, Realization was a kind of freedom I had never known before, not the freedom of complete independence, but the deeper liberty that comes from choosing connection, from surrendering control not to another person but to the possibilities that emerge when two people build together with intention and trust. I was just the photographer until he told me to strip. And in that moment of choice to remain behind my camera or step into the frame, everything had changed for both of us.